Right, so can you make sure now, like, that's gonna look like,
Well,
they rejected it.
Ashley signed it. I mean, to me, these look original.
I know, and they said not an original.
I'll have to call people and tell them it's not original.
Sorry, the recorder picked it up.
I mean, these were.
Sorry.
The one for you is over there.
Yeah, I know, I'm sure it's recordable.
Okay. Good luck. It has no.
I'll take the $1,600 bid, no problem.
Shelby, how's this?
That's what I thought you were gonna tell me.
Well, I mean, I can retype this, because both of their property owners,
You want those one in there?
I'll retype. Do you have this that I can redo the first page?
Probably, yeah.
Can you email that to me and I'll redo the first page?
Ryan's here for,
He's here for.
that's next week, he's done.
They're here for war, I believe. Yeah, they're here for next week.
Mark's here, so.
I don't know. He's here on the other hours.
It's up to you.
She's out on Wednesday, so Monday.
Welcome to the Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting on July 16th, 2024 at 6 o'clock. The agenda is in the back of the room for anybody that does not have one. And at this time, I'd like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just want to announce that this meeting may be audio and video recorded by third parties. Before we get started, everybody hear me? Before we get started, I'd just like to make a comment on behalf of the board. The Board of Supervisors of West Goshen Township wishes to express its sincere condolences to the families of those who were killed and injured in the senseless tragedy that occurred Saturday, July 13th in Butler, PA. We strongly condemn any and all acts of violence, and we wish the former President Donald Trump a speedy recovery. Okay, with that, we'll now get on with the agenda meeting, which will be public comment. And if anybody has a public comment to make of anything that is not on the agenda tonight, feel free to raise your hand. I would like to limit not only the public comment, but all the items that you want to comment on the agenda to 2 to 3 minutes, if we could respect everybody's time. Okay, in the back? Yes, would you please come up and state your name and your address into the microphone? Thank you.
My name is Dan Diskin, 807 Spruce Avenue. I was here a couple months ago about the supplemental cooling unit at the university. I just wanted to thank the township for taking quick action on that. Number one, it was a blood familiar plan, and I want to thank you for that, number one. But then number two, in dealing with that process and talking to township personnel, I came aware of a section of your code, noise ordinance, which is chapter 52A, noise, 52A-5 exceptions, under under F. Work or activities performed or sponsored by schools and governmental agencies or their contractors in the performance of public service. My understanding is that township employees, and correct me if I'm wrong, interpret that to mean that the university has a blanket exception and the noise ordinance does not apply to them by virtue of the fact that they're a public entity and anything they do is by definition then public service. I disagree with that interpretation because I think they do a lot of stuff that's not public service. I think they're, number one, not really a public facility. They're a place that you have to apply for, pay for, be admitted to go into. They have signs on their doors that say these are not public buildings. So I think that some standard needs to be applied to what they're doing is what they're doing in public service. Like if they decide to have fireworks at 2 a.m., that's not public service. They shouldn't have a blanket exception. And whoever wrote that code, I don't think meant that to be that. So I searched in the code, there's no definition of public service. And what I'm asking is if you can ask your solicitor to, number one, look at how that's being interpreted by your employees, and number two, advise as to whether you might want to put a definition of public service into your code so that you don't just say, hey, anything you do is fine. Because it shouldn't be that. I don't know why anyone would intend that in writing an ordinance. That's it.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, Bonnie Ziola, 804 Carlson Avenue. I was just wondering, I'm kind of new to coming to the meetings, and I actually enjoy learning what's going on and appreciate what you do. And I wonder if you would consider posting when you're having meetings and even some of the findings, such as ordinances or interesting facts, on the West Goshen Township Facebook page, which a lot of people look at rather than the Daily Local, which nobody personally that I know looks at. And there's other things that go on in the township, little bike parades and things like that, that we find of interest. And I think there's a lot of people out there who would be a little bit more interested in what's going on if it were a little bit more easily accessible.
Okay, we currently do post it on our website. And we do have an e-newsletter that's a monthly, that goes out monthly electronically. I don't know if you're signed up for that, but there is a lot of information in the e-newsletter also.
Right, but when there are reminders, for instance, there are reminders when there's a bike parade. Mm-hmm. There could be a reminder, tomorrow is the Board of Supervisors, or tomorrow is something, and at this supervisors meeting, here's what happened. It doesn't have to be minutes, but I know last time an ordinance was passed, or nothing private, of course, but things of interest to people. People are interested.
Sure, and I
so
appreciate
the
that.
Facebook page
Yeah.
is easily accessible.
Did you want to make a comment, Chris?
Madam Vice Chair, we do publish the information from each of the board meetings in the monthly e-newsletter. It's not exactly minutes, but it is a rundown of all the action and the discussion items that are before the board. And we do that every month, and we do that regularly.
Right. I'm just saying Facebook
It's a
people
reminder.
check it regularly and say, oh, look at that, rather than the monthly newsletter. So,
As a reminder.
yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Yes, Mr. Golden.
Charlie Golden, West Goshen. I'll try and make it in 3 minutes. I too thank you for your sentiment about this terrible incident over the past weekend. I want to cover something about hate speech. Hate speech, you've all had training. I personally have been hearing things that I consider fall into the category of hate speech. Over the review of the ordinance, I've heard things like hair on fire, grandstanding. I've heard something to the effect that for ideological reasons, kind of misdirecting the public. Their hair's on fire, they're scared. So, I'm a code review guy. I'm an engineer. I don't have anything really to benefit or lose as you pass your ordinances. I'm just a citizen pointing out things that I think are being misinterpreted or misapplied in the code. So I think personal attacks have no place in our discourse or public discourse, and I'd like to see that addressed in the future. If we can keep it to content comments and not personal comments, I'd appreciate it. With that said, there is something that I see published June 18th. Mr. Bayshore, Township Manager, said the Township has adopted the International Property Maintenance Code, the IPMC, which is part of the I-codes.
That's correct.
It's not part of the statewide building code, though.
That's correct.
Well, okay, so this is the same string, let's say, that you pull on the EV mandates, and how do we go? Okay, I'm glad you have a comment then, but I guess my question is, how do we go from an I-code, hopefully everybody can follow that, which is a recommendation which then needs to be adopted into our building codes officially after the proper reviews. How can we go from an I-code to adopting something in the township? Doesn't that skip over the national code review and officially being part of our codes?
No, because the authority, the separate authority, the codes that you're talking about are written by the International Code Council and are adopted by the state, and then are the statewide building code. The IPMC is adopted on a municipality by municipality basis. You can choose whether or not to adopt and enforce those codes. The authority that's granted to this board to adopt the amendment to the subdivision and land development ordinance is contained in the municipality's planning code, which is a whole separate document from the building codes. Is that correct, Kristen?
Yeah, and the statewide building code adopts some, but not all, of the codes published by the International Code Council. So the International Code Council's property maintenance code, which is updated every 3 years, is not part of the statewide building code. So every municipality has a choice to make as to whether they adopt that as part of their code. West Goshen and most of the municipalities that I represent did adopt the property maintenance code, specifically the one published by the ICC. And what Chris was saying as far as the EV ordinance, what we talked about was the authority for those provisions comes from the state law, the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, that allows in the subdivision land development ordinance regulations or incentivizing sustainable energy and things like that. So that's where we believe we have the legal authority to put it in the SALDO, and it was not, we would not have had the authority to amend the building code to put provisions relating to fitting out a building for EV capabilities, because the building code we must adopt and we must follow what the state has adopted. So only if the state at Department of Labor and Industry, if they adopt a code either through the ICC or through amendments that have EV provisions, we then, the board doesn't have any, they have no right to say yes or no to it. They must adopt those.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense to an extent. Of course, you know there's just an opposite opinion. There is sustainability experts who say not only what we did is a little confusing and vague, but it may be unconstitutional, and I think they're thinking about the Pennsylvania Constitution. So I think that'll all play out in the future, and I think once we put this into action, we'll find out things that work and don't work, is my guess. But I'm also wondering if the Chevron deference Supreme Court ruling doesn't have some additional limitations onto how we do all of that. That's pretty much it, although I would like to announce that we are forming a citizen watchdog group to review how our budgets are put together. We think we'll be in place in September, and we'd like to bring points of order or points that we find to this Board of Supervisors during the budget process, and also follow up during the spending. And I'm wondering if Mr. Woolman, if you did get the answer you were looking for when you asked about the $2,100 spent on 2 flags at the end of last meeting. Is that even possible that we spent $2,100 on 2 auxiliary room flags?
It's flags, poles, shipping, all that stuff.
Right, so on Amazon, the most I could come up with is $160 each. So I'm wondering how in the world, and I've looked on different sites, even flags made in the USA, I'm wondering how in the world someone actually spent $2,100 on 2 flags.
I will look into it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, it's my understanding, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Good evening, Ed Mayer, 3 Yorktown Avenue. I was wondering if I could get an update regarding the Parkway Shopping Center and the Wawa. I know the appeal was filed, and I think there was an extension also. Are you guys able to give a brief summary of what's transpiring?
As of right now, we're in negotiations with them. We're talking to them, let's put it that way.
Talking to Wawa?
Talking to, yes, Wawa,
Okay.
and their attorneys.
To the owner, Joe Walsh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the appellant in the conditional use application was actually the owner of the shopping center. It was not Wawa.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I went over to the Chester County Courthouse, so I've been getting like the court summary, and then I saw the order, and then today I went and I saw another order that it was extended, so I figured, I'd stop by and just ask. Another topic regarding that area, Parkway Shopping Center, specifically High Street, and maybe this is not the right time to talk about it. I understand it's a state road. It's a state road right now that is a racetrack. When I say racetrack, drivers don't know what the shoulder is for over there. They're not obeying the speed limit. It's becoming, to me, very unsafe. And I guess I want to try, how can we go about getting, one, speed reduced, and also trying to make people a little more cognizant of, and I'll give the example, going Paley Pike into town, where the Lidl is and the Popeyes. You guys did a nice job with merging the road, and I feel a lot safer going in there. Is there anything we can do on High Street regarding some of the shoulders with lineage? Because I almost got sideswiped yesterday, and if it wasn't for my wife in the car, I probably would have had a little confrontation with somebody, because this is getting ridiculous over there. That, careless driving, and the speed produces a lot of noise. I don't know why it's 40 miles an hour there. It's mostly residential. There's 20 some odd ways onto High Street on one side, and another 20 egresses, to driveways or streets on the other side. But yet we're blasting down there, and nobody's doing 40.
Yeah.
And there's no consequences. Like, they get away with it, and there's none. And there's got to be consequences. Somebody's going to get hurt again.
Well, as we know, it is a PennDOT road. And,
Yeah.
The good news and bad news, I guess, 2 things the way you look at it. Right now, I guess we don't have control over that. Is that correct, Mark? Is there any, right now it's a PennDOT road, and we really can't give any suggestions on the road, the condition of the road, or suggestions on how we think it would be safer?
I know what you're talking about. The only thing I could recommend is maybe listen for marks on the shoulders, but again, you have to go through PennDOT to keep people off the shoulder. Thick white lines,
Now, is PennDOT responsible for that road all the way through Westchester?
I don't know exactly.
Yes. Up until it gets to Goshen Road, I think there becomes a point that it's the borough, but it's much on the north side of the borough.
Now, is that something we could suggest to PennDOT? I know we've met with them in the past and have some suggestions that we thought were viable, but not that they have to do it, but I'm just wondering if there's a conversation that can be had with PennDOT.
And I don't want to tie you up real long, but real quick, I asked Ashley, when you guys were out, right?
Yes.
I said, has West Goshen ever thought about taking over High Street from the bridge, the overpass, to the border of the borough? And her eyes kind of got big, and she's like, why? I said, well, because then you probably have more control, but I don't know what kind of burden that is on the township, or do you really have more control? And
Just real quick, there's certain standards that have to be met in terms of establishing a speed limit, and it doesn't matter whether it's a local road or PennDOT road. So those same standards apply, and it's actually based on speed studies and the 85th percentile speed. So I don't think turning the road back, first of all, you need PennDOT to agree to it, which I'm not sure they will, don't know that. Two, regardless of whether it's PennDOT owned or township owned, those same standards as to how the speed limit gets set have to be followed. As far as the design of the road and if there's safety improvements, I think the township absolutely can have a dialogue with PennDOT about that and request that.
And what setting would that be done in?
Well, part of it could be done in the context of like, you know, a development application that abuts the road. So if the Parkway Shopping Center were to completely redevelop, that they would need, if they needed an HOP, which is a highway occupancy permit, that would sort of start that dialogue. It doesn't have to be in conjunction with the development though. It can be done independently.
And the only reason I asked about taking over the road was, i.e. the example of the borough and Gay Street, you know, to be able to close off the road, which was a great idea, I thought. So,
And a difficult task. It took years to have that happen.
Yeah. So, okay, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments.
Tina, I have a follow-up on that. So, Chief Carroll, do we do any enforcement on that section of South High Street?
Yes.
How frequently do
South
you?
High Street almost every month.
Every what, sorry?
Every month.
South High Street almost every month.
Okay, and have you noticed an increase in traffic violations, speeding?
No, it's not like that. I can ask you to speak to Sergeant Bryce from the traffic union, I'm sure he can answer your question.
Yeah, I think right now the traffic, if you drive down, like I wouldn't do any traffic studies or anything down there right now because the college is down. When the college comes in, being a local resident, the craziness goes up on the road. It does. And so like right now it's calm, but you still have those incidents and it's scary sometimes.
Okay, Dr. Wood. Thank you for your comment.
Doug White, West Goshen Township. There's two other traffic safety areas. Please note PennDOT roads again, 322 bypass westbound, the off-ramp up onto Pottstown Pike, northbound. If you could suggest to PennDOT if they do a little rearranging up there because you have to pull way out to see the northbound traffic and there's some close calls up there. And then also Pottstown Pike towards the borough southbound, off-ramp to 322 east. There's a temporary stop sign. If they could put a little warning there to warn people that there's a stop sign because you get rear-ended. It didn't happen, but that's two spots where we can suggest some improvement.
Thank you, Dr. White. I'd also like to suggest that we do have quarterly police traffic meetings. I think that can get the ball rolling. It started with Brian and Laura. I think that would be a good opportunity at that time. Any other public comments? Okay, let's move on to the next agenda. Mr. Nagel, are you okay for us to keep the normal agenda at this point?
Yes, thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
Okay. With that being said, we will go on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is discussion regarding the multimodal transportation fund grant application authorized for submission to address the flooding on Montgomery Avenue. And we'll have Brian start that conversation off, please.
Chris, do you want to give a background about the application and then I'll do the technical?
Sure. So before the board this evening is discussion regarding the plans for the multimodal grant application to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development to address flooding on Montgomery Avenue. The board previously authorized Carroll Engineering to prepare the application. They've been working on that. They've reached the preliminary stage with the plans. We are on track to have our submission into the state by the July 31st deadline. So we wanted to take the opportunity to review the plans with the board prior to the submission. Both myself, our Township Engineer Brian Kolakowski, and our Street Superintendent Mark Bertolami have met with Chris Peterson from Carroll Engineering to review the plans. So that is what is before the board this evening. And I will turn it over to Brian to go over the technical aspects of what's being proposed with the project.
Thank you, Chris. So in front of you tonight is the sketch that is going to be submitted with the application from Carroll. The blue dashed line you see is the two streams that converge and flow under the Montgomery Avenue right about at the intersection with Chestnut. It then turns to the south and flows under Gay Street. This is very similar to the project that was done in Volmar, where we had an existing culvert that was undersized, and we wrote to the project to make it as best as we could. There's a couple limiting factors on this. One is the existing road, which I'll get into. Two is there's a force main that is just below the culvert on the upstream side, so that limits how deep we can go. And the third is the width of the stream is about 10 feet. So Chris Peterson, Carroll Engineering, they did calculations and that, and it was provided to you in your packet. I can summarize them. Walmart Street ended up being one where the design storm, we could not meet the 100-year storms, we did the 10-year storm, and that was what we met because the limiting factor was the width of the stream. This is a similar instance where the width of the stream currently is the limiting factor for how wide we can make the flow going under the road. Currently, this is a picture of the upstream side. Two circles represent approximately where the two 24-inch pipes are, and this is the approximate box culvert that's currently there. You can see they're partially submerged. So currently, the water surface elevation that's in those pipes is about 1.5 feet below the surface of the road. They're about 2.5 feet deep from the top of the road to the bottom of the current pipes and culvert. And there's about 6 to 8 inches of roadway cover on top of the pipes. So there's not a lot of space to work vertically. Chris is proposing to put in twin 36-inch box culverts. So this is a 24, up to 3 feet deep. So we can lower it slightly and widen them to be 10 feet each. So you have two 5-foot culverts with a 10-foot opening. Two 10-foot culverts, widening
3 foot deep.
3 foot deep. So you have a flow. You have about 20 foot of flow width, which we could feather in and feather out, feather into it back to the 10-foot wide. The design would be sufficient to carry the 10-year storm, which is similar to what we did at Walmart, 10-year storm event. 100 years, what we typically design are pipes, our orders requires pipes, conveyance systems, basins to be designed to. To do a 100-year storm event on this one, we'd be severely impacting the much more the roadway. He provided calculations and a way that you'd be looking about a 40-foot span bridge to get that water under the roadway. It would be 40-foot clear span. The stream's only 10 feet wide. If we get the water under this road now, you still will not get under Gay Street. So if we would raise the road, reprofile and rework the entire intersection, impact all the properties between Gay and that, to put a 40-foot wide bridge in there, you still can't get the water under Gay Street. So the best we can do without major project to reconfigure the whole road, redo the intersection, impact Chestnut, impact the corner of the school property, is two 10-foot wide culverts side by side that will pass the 10-year storm. Currently, it probably can't handle the 2-year storm event. That's why it floods so often. So the 10-year storm event is one that has a much less chance of happening in once a year versus the higher event, which is a 2-year storm. So the idea is to make it as best we can to allow more water to pass. Will it still flood? Potentially. It won't be perfect.
one question regarding, it was recommended that the township petition Westchester Borough to correct the issue with the downstream portion of the Chester Creek for the best results. Have we done that?
We did meet with the borough to discuss the project and kind of what would happen further downstream, but I don't think they've actually started looking at what they would have to do. So that's in their jurisdiction.
Okay.
They didn't have any issues with the proposal for us to allow more to pass. They said it wouldn't cause any issues in the borough. Their public works director did not seem to have any issues with us causing further problems downstream.
I want to say we met with them back in March, I believe. It was earlier this year to kind of kick off this project.
Yes, it was earlier, March, potentially April, but I think it was March.
Do we know how long this project would take?
To construct?
Yes, since Montgomery Avenue would have to be closed down, I imagine.
If it's similar to the size of Balmar Street, would Balmar Street take about 2 months, 3 months?
I think, yeah, probably 3 or 4.
Yeah, we probably, if it's similar in size, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it would probably be similar in terms of time frame.
Yeah, it could be 3 to 4 months.
So we would go through this whole exercise and it's still not really correcting it. We'd still have.
It would allow more water to pass under the road to alleviate flooding issues on the more often storm events. It's the high level storm events we can't get.
Can't
But
control.
we just don't, the stream itself isn't wide enough.
Yeah.
So, but the lower level events, 10 years and below, will be able to pass under the road without causing any roadway flooding, which will maintain open access on Montgomery for more often during storm events.
Is there, at Balmar Street, we went elliptical culverts. Is there any reason why, except for cost savings considerations, we couldn't go with the elliptical culverts, which would increase the square footage area to allow more flow?
We're actually putting in bigger culverts because we're putting in boxes. They're actually a rectangle.
Yeah, I just.
They're full rectangle. We're putting in 2 of those, so we can't get, you get less, in the same vertical, you get less flow area. We're limited vertically to how high we can be, how deep we can go because of the force main.
Because the culverts that they put on Balmar Street were, we had figured 73.5 square feet with the 58-inch by 91-inch ellipticals.
Yeah. We just don't have the data.
We don't have the height there?
We're limited to 3 feet because of where
Because of the height of the road?
No, because of where the force main is. And then even if we can go deeper, the stream still has to, you still can't get water. If you put it deeper, the water won't come out the other end. It's still going to fill in its natural depth. The bottom of the stream will seek its own natural level once it's done.
Sean, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So when I looked at the calculations that were provided in the board packet, you know, the design with the 3x10, 2 3x10 box culverts, the 10-year storm event was 357 cubic feet per second, I believe.
Yes.
When you looked at the same size of culverts, so again, twin 3x10, they actually could handle, am I reading this right, 608 cubic feet per second, which is short of the 100-year storm, but is way more than the 10-year storm event. Am I reading that correctly?
I don't have this calculation. Look at the calculation.
This is the 100-year storm, this is the 10-year.
Okay, so in the 100-year storm, he's saying that it can handle 608 cubic feet per second through the
pipe.
Yes.
And over the top is 157, so that's what would be over the road still.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so in actual fact, it is potentially that a lot more of the water beyond the 10-year storm event could pass under the road. Although it can't handle the calculation for a 100-year storm, it's closer to the 100-year storm event than it is to the 10-year storm event, from a volume perspective.
It can handle more cubic feet per second than what is calculated as a 10-year storm event.
Okay, so can we talk about the potential unintended consequence of the design on the Gay Street downstream situation? So today it floods, and obviously the water that floods on Montgomery Avenue is attenuated to some degree. It's not obviously reaching Gay Street in the same manner that once we put in a new box culvert that allows that stream to flow more cubic feet per second past Montgomery Avenue towards Gay Street, will there be a much bigger volume of water now reaching Gay Street? And will we create a flooding situation within the borough at that location?
We discussed that with the borough and they weren't concerned.
Have they done the calculations to show that?
No, the borough has not done any calculations to our knowledge, but we talked about it, allowing the water to pass. And the borough's position was the water gets there, it just goes over the roads that are under the road. It still gets there, it still gets to Gay Street.
I understand it still gets there, but right now it's also getting there because it's also being attenuated to the degree that it's spreading along Montgomery Avenue and going down Chestnut Street and flooding all the property, so it's not as concentrated a direct flow as it will be once that new culvert allows that flow to pass through Montgomery Avenue. Yes, there might be some slight overtopping there, but you're going to get more volume more quickly to Gay Street, in my opinion.
That was discussed with the borough and they were not concerned.
Right. I think as part of the analysis, someone in the borough needs to look at what could happen there.
That's why I asked that question too. I think it's a community problem.
We
It needs to
raised
be
that. We
resolved.
raised that with the borough staff when we had the initial meetings, and they were fully supportive of it. And they did not seem to have any issues. They did not present any issues, and they didn't have any concerns with what we were proposing at the time.
Could you put that picture back up that you had before that shows all the debris in front of the piping that's there now? Yeah, this is a lot of the problem here is when you get, a storm coming through there, it takes all the wood and the trash and everything else right up to the inlets here, and it blocks it. And sometimes it goes all the way into the piping, so it becomes difficult just to even clear it. Is there any thought on building some kind of mitigation screening or something like that that would stop all this from piling up and going into the inlets?
The discussion with Chris was that by making these two culverts 10 feet wide, this clogging situation could be alleviated because you have 10 feet of opening side to side to allow passage through.
When we get down there,
And we discussed it with Mark, and it'd be easier to clean at 10 feet wide than it is at 24 feet wide.
if you get some of those logs through there and it just get jammed up.
Yeah.
When we do our CRC creek cleanup, that's the problem. We clear it out, we get a lot of that debris out of there, but then it's all the way deep inside, that piping just can't reach it.
That's part of the idea behind the 10-foot width.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
If we can somehow stop that from clogging up.
If you put a rack in front of it, it's going to stop everything, and then that becomes a dam.
Yeah.
Typically racks are, that's what you put them on basins so they don't get sucked out, you keep the trash in the basin instead of clogging the outlet structure.
Well,
Or in the stream, you don't put.
You're the smart guy, so you come up with a solution. I mean, this is not an unusual situation.
It's
I'm
not
sure there's
unusual.
things that have been done.
This happens quite a bit at any time you have water that's concentrated under a road. It can clog and it just has to be maintained and cleaned.
I just don't want to see a situation where we spend a lot of money and create a fix that we hope will work that won't. Because it just gets clogged up sometime down.
I mean, my understanding was part of this was the intent that we would be responsible. We would have an agreement with PennDOT, but we would be responsible for maintaining these inlets.
Yes.
So Mark, your team would be there on the hook to remove these tree branches and logs that are massive that do come downstream in these big events, right? So
That wouldn't be a problem.
you don't see it as good.
What's your maintenance schedule on something like that, Mark, for a
We
culvert?
would just make sure, before we're gonna get a big event, we go down and make sure it's clear.
Okay.
Now, right now, it belongs to PennDOT, so we kind of we've asked them to clean it, we just kind of here where it is. And if we go down there and start digging or backing, they might say, we messed it up, the pipes blowing.
Yeah, that's your problem. Yeah, I hear you. Okay, is there any other comments, questions from the board on this topic?
Despite my reservation about the borough needing to give some thought and consideration and do a little analysis on what the consequences would be to this project being installed, I still think we should submit the application.
Yes, I agree.
So just, as we discussed before, so the estimated cost for the project total is roughly $1 million. The estimate that we received is about $1 million, which is similar in size to the Baltimore Street project. But if awarded, the grant would pay for 70% of the project cost, so we'd be on the hook for roughly $300,000. We have letters of support from state representation, from Good Fellowship and Ambulance Company. I'm having trouble communicating with the hospital to get a letter from them, but I also been in touch with the borough to get a letter from them as well. And we have information provided by the police department for the last 5 years of the events that they've responded to. Mark's provided pictures, and we did get some resident feedback as well that will include in the application.
Great.
So that's where everything stands.
So could we vote on this?
You don't need to vote on anything. The board previously adopted a resolution authorizing it, so that's been sent on to Carroll Engineering. This was kind of a, here we are, this is where we're sent, this is the direction we're going.
Now, is Carol going to write the application for the grant, or do you?
Carroll has been hired by the board to write the application.
Okay, is there any other questions from the board or comments? If not, I'll open it to public comment regarding this topic. Dr. White?
Has there been any thought to creating an upstream channel on either side of the stream to protect the inlet that way? Sort of like retaining walls on the upstream side, and keep debris from going down into the stream some distance up, and then that way it'll add cost, of course, but and possibly some maintenance, but you won't need screening, and it may protect that inlet from getting clogged.
If we go outside the right of way, it's all private property. So you have to have property owner buy in to do any work on the stream outside of the limits of the project, which is the right of way.
Okay, so
upstream is,
along the side of that stream is private property.
yes, as is downstream.
And one of the goals of this project is to keep everything within the public right of way.
Additionally, they're proposing, to refresh the project, there is a proposal as well to extend a crosswalk and extend the sidewalk that's currently in the school district property to the end of the Parkway Cleaners project.
And there was a request that came from Good Fellowship to looking for an opticom at one of the intersection lights for ambulance, and we're going to incorporate that into the project scope as well.
Which light?
I believe it's the one further north, right? Because there isn't a light at that intersection.
Yeah, I think the opticon is going to turn off the light. It's going to control the light here at the
dog light.
Yes.
Yep. At that location that Brian highlighted.
Yeah, this is the McDonald's. It's going to control the light that controls this intersection, so they can have clear access out.
When's the application due?
July 31st.
And when do you think that they'll be giving interest for who gets awarded these grants?
A year.
A year?
Anytime you submit with DCED, I would bank on a year. So in all likelihood, you'll submit. Now it could be a lot sooner.
Yeah, I thought it was this year for these awards.
It could be. It could be the end of the year. It could be some other time. It depends on the number of applications that they have and the schedule for the Commonwealth Financing Authority. But I know, like with our local services application, we submitted that in November. We still haven't heard about that one. We submitted an application for through the Green Space and Recreation program in May. That'll probably be the end of the year, so this could be the end of the year. I would bank on this being a 2026 project.
Chris, just one other thing on grants. So my understanding about the multimodal grant application is there's a parallel kind of grant opportunity associated with it, and quite often people apply for both of these grants. I know they're different amounts and different sizes of award, but
we could.
I mean, that is a full grant process, I believe. So we should try to keep the maximum opportunity in front of us.
And what you could do is, what you could try to do is minimize the town, like we're trying to do a community park, apply for multiple programs to try and minimize the township's outlay. We did that in Malvern for a project.
So could we follow with Chris on that and see what our next grant program would be?
Sure. It would be, if there's a multimodal transportation fund program, which is virtually identical with PennDOT, that I think opens in September, I believe.
Okay.
So we can look into that.
Okay, is there any other public comments or questions? Yes.
Yeah. The project itself, is this the same Goose Creek that ties into the Goose Creek between Matlack and South Franklin and enters into like what's known as Riptown, where the bridge is, where the Rams Gate and all that is? And I guess Sean had said something about the water flow in the borough. There's going to be more water flow, or at least, what about all that, like the debris, the issue with the debris? They're gonna have more debris, are they aware of that? Because like Neal Street in South Franklin is just basically a floodplain down there. And it gets some pretty big rains and it's flooded out. Now, they've done some stuff down there around Green Field, you know, to help with that. But there are a lot of ducts down there. And I'm just wondering if the borough really realizes like the impact of it. For stuff to get clogged up in down there.
Yeah, it's been an issue. I know we do the watershed cleaning every year, and there's some nasty stuff in there that we pull out. So it is a problem. Okay.
Personally, I'm hopeful that with having Mark's team keeping an eye on that, this new culvert, assuming we get the grant, we go ahead with the project, we're actually going to get more debris out of the stream in our township that may or may not be being passed on to the borough today, because you've seen the pictures, you know what it's like. It gets jammed up and then anything's getting washed over or through. So I actually think we'll be removing more in our township, which may or may not help them downstream, because you know, you've got new debris coming in further down.
I think you had mentioned that behind Target and all that, there was a lot of debris back there.
Yeah, and 60 tires.
So,
yeah. It was a dumping ground, but hopefully with Target, that'll stop now because it'll be active in that area. Any other comments, questions from the public? Okay. If not, then I guess we'll move on to the next topic, which is number 5 on the agenda. Discussion regarding a request to vacate Brandywine Parkway and turn the property over to Teva Pharmaceutical. And on that, we can have, Chris, would you like to start that off?
Yes, Madam Vice Chair, give me 1 second. So, Madam Vice Chair, before the board this evening is a request to consider vacating Brandywine Parkway and turning the road over to Teva Pharmaceutical, which has facilities located at 145 Brandywine Parkway. And I will note representatives from Teva Pharmaceutical are here this evening to discuss this process with the board. I provided a screenshot of the proposed location, but Ms. Camp provided large size images to better visualize what the location looks like. Representatives from Teva Pharmaceutical and JMR Engineering met with staff members of the township to discuss a need to increase security at the site. This is due to non-employees becoming on-site concerns. Initially, they proposed a plan to install 5 private access gates located at the end of the Parkway cul-de-sac. The discussion progressed into the possibility of the township vacating Brandywine Parkway to Teva Pharmaceutical, since the road really only serves their property. A single security gate would then be installed at the intersection of Brandywine Parkway and Wilson Drive. In this meeting included the Chief of Police, our Fire Marshal and Emergency Management Coordinator, Andrea Testa, as well as our Township Engineer, Brian Kolakowski. They were in favor of this option. Additionally, they provided a letter requesting this consideration by the Township. And subsequent to that, Brian and Mark discussed the option, and they agreed that there is not a downside to turning it over to Teva. And they also analyzed the potential impact on the Township's liquid fuels funding, which would be approximately just over $1,600 based on the length of Brandywine Parkway. There are 2 options if the board wishes to proceed forward with this option, which would be to adopt an ordinance vacating the roadway or enter into an agreement with the property owners whose land abuts the portion of the roadway being vacated. And Ms. Camp also provided the legislation for the board's review. So it is our recommendation that if the board does proceed forward with an agreement, that this stipulate that the road would remain private and not be reverted or reoffered for dedication back to the township.
Which I don't know if that's lawful. I
Okay.
think about that, but if I could add, if there's 2 ways to vacate a road. One is by ordinance. If the board adopts an ordinance, you have to notify property owners whose land abuts the road to be vacated 10 days prior to the hearing. They have the right, if you choose to adopt the ordinance, to then petition the Court of Common Pleas for damages. So they could allege that their property is harmed and diminished in value as a result of vacating the road. So it's not just Teva, it's anybody whose land abuts any part of the road to be vacated. So that is a potential damage that the township would be on the hook for. And I couldn't classify that or characterize what that would be unless you had appraisals done. The second way to go about it is agreement of all property owners it's not just people who use the road for access, it's people whose property abuts the road. So that's why I wanted you to have the visual to see that QVC, even though they don't gain their access from this, they have land that abuts the road as well as the parcel 105.1E. Well, actually, that's not clear to me because looking at this, there's a strip of land that's rectangular in shape that looks like it abuts the road that the tax maps don't identify. I don't know if that's part of the right-of-way of Brandywine Parkway or who owns that, but we'd have to further research that. The Postal Service property looks like it does touch the parkway, so they likely would have to be somebody that was also included in the agreement. So the way the agreement would have to, if the board is interested in this approach, I would suggest that maybe the petitioner or the person that's requesting the board to do this to maybe go start the dialogue with the property owners who's about the road and see if they would be agreeable to entering an agreement. Because they would be the potential parties that if you adopted an ordinance would have the right to petition the court of damages. So I think you'd want to, before you made a decision on this, you want to understand what potential liability you're subjecting the township to. But as far as the last comment that Chris made, I'm not sure. I'd have to think that through and research it a little bit on whether you could impose a covenant that something could never again be offered. Because one of the things that Brian and I talked about today in preparation for the meeting is we know what's on these properties today, but we don't know what potentially would be on the properties in the future. So, these businesses go out of business, QVC ups and goes, and the property owner sells, and a new property owner comes in, and it is a property right for everybody whose land abuts this public road. So that's just a consideration.
Just for clarification, let's take QVC for example. They don't use that road we're talking about for any access into their property. Am I correct about that? They don't use it for access?
I don't think they do, no.
So what damages could they claim
because they, again, for the future, to the extent that in the future they want to subdivide that property, they want to tear down the buildings that are there, they have a property right to, they have frontage on that road that they potentially could gain access for a future development. And there's nothing to say that now, if they decided that they wanted to have access to the road, it's a public road. So we would have to let them do whatever our procedures are to gain access to a public road. And by giving that property right up, that has value. I can't tell you what that value is. That's something the board review would have to determine, and it would be based on appraisals.
But it's not actually QVC anymore that owns that property. It's Oak Tree Capital, so it's an investment company that is the property owner. So that could complicate things as well. Is there a different solution? So the intention here is to avoid having 5 different security gates at the end of Brandywine Parkway. Is there a partial private road that is where the B is on the Brandywine Avenue on this map that allows 1 security gate and the only abutting, and the road from that point on would then become a private road, and the only abutting properties to that are all Teva owned?
I think, Mr. Rob, this is Jack Robinson from JMR Engineering. I think you can probably speak to that.
Yes, good evening. Yes, I got one actually. Forgot I had one. Mine's on the dark side, mine's red. Yes, we actually did review putting one just where you said to be 4 or 5 years ago. And I think the township was, at the time, wasn't in favor of actually giving any of the road back at that point with the initial meetings that we had. So that is an option. This is the easy. Once the more we talked about this, we talked about it with your staff. It seemed like giving the entire road back just made sense because nothing else accesses this entire road except Teva. So, and this right-of-way, just for discussion, actually is right-of-way. It's irregularly shaped. It's a little bit extra wide, which is actually nice because if we did put some kind of a guard tower right here at the front, well, you have a little bit of room for it.
And that brings in that property to have to come to an agreement.
Right. I understand that. Yeah. But they already have 2 public roads. I mean, right now the right-of-way ends right here, I believe, if I'm mistaken. So the condition that you have with QVC is sort of similar. I mean, they don't even have a cul-de-sac. The actual turnaround is on private property for them. So I think this is a better condition where if you made this cut off right here, people couldn't even go down the road, and it was all private. Rather than just having it, that was kind of the issue I think we had before. When we wanted to put the guard tower here, it's like, okay, ours stops here, yours, how do our snow plows turn around? So we got another kind of issues like that. So when we cut it off here, it simplified things. They don't even have to go down there. They're not going to turn around at all. There was no concern with turnarounds. So there was other things that were thought of.
Just explain that. So what, even if you cut it off anyway, you're going to have a turnaround as you climb the road, right?
Well, it wouldn't be plowed.
So don't you need access for employees though, and all the rest of it?
Pardon?
Don't you need access for Tetra employees to access the property?
So it's going to be done with fobs or transponders, and the emergency staff already understand that everybody would be supplied with the same transponders.
Sean, to answer your question, the private road, whatever becomes private or Brandywine Parkway, would be required to be plowed and maintained by TEP.
Okay, so
But it also, right. Guys, hold on, they don't get the whole road. They get from the center line of the road. Right, the road is vacated. By operation of law, the property interests in the right-of-way revert to the adjacent property owners from the center line of the road. So you won't get all of it. You'll get where your property abuts the road. You'll get the full road, but where your property does not abut it, from the center line of the road goes back to the adjacent property owners. Hence the reason they have an interest that they potentially would change. So you don't have the right to just say, we're going to do what we want there. That's why the township would need the agreement of those property owners, exactly what happens, who maintains it, who pays for what.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
No, I
Okay.
understand, yeah.
Okay.
That was just, the discussion logistically is for the entire road. I don't see why these property owners would want to have it.
They may not now. They may not now, right? But they may in the future.
But that just makes it really complicated for us, because now we have to manage getting their agreements and...
Well, you could make them go out and do the legwork. Right. Let them go do contact and see it. And they may come back and say, you're absolutely right, we think it's a great idea. We're willing to sign an agreement that says we relinquish any rights to that road, we relinquish any damages we'd be entitled to. I mean, that has happened, and that's why the code is written in that manner. But that would be something that the board could say, Tiva, you go make those conversations and have those dialogues and then report back. Because otherwise, if you do it by ordinance, potentially then, once you've enacted that ordinance, you've subjected yourself to potential liability from abutting property owners for damages.
So is it just 3 other property owners? Is it the QVC parcel, post office, and this?
105.1, yeah. That's what I believe to be the case, yes.
It is. Just so to be clear, Teva really just wants to know from the board if this is of interest to the township. If it was of interest to the staff. If it's not an interest, then they're not going to pursue it. But they want to know if it's an interest because they have to run up a flagpole to a number of people, that are a number of levels above the folks that are even work here. So it's not just something that, we voted on it, yes, and they're ready to go. They want to know if it's just an option that they should be discussing it internally.
Okay, so let's ask the board your thoughts on that. John?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, if you can make this happen in agreement with your neighbors, that's a solution. I still question, though, to Sean's point there, why could you just put a gate like right in this area here? That would just be your property. You're saying the problem would be plowing? Would that be an issue?
The township would break the issue of like how the plows turn around. I guess we'd have to have a separate turnaround.
We would need some type of cul-de-sac there to turn around.
Yeah.
So that really isn't an option, putting it in this location right here.
It is if you were to do a cul-de-sac there to turn around. But you can't, if a big truck goes down and plow, you can't do like a 3-point.
Yeah, to get around, okay.
If you don't mind me, Mark, what do you do with, Wilson Drive, where it kind of goes into QVC's property? Like, what do you guys do right now?
The paving notches before you get to the big circle, QVC.
Okay.
Would you mind coming up and just pointing that, Mark, with a laser or something? Thank you. Not to put you on the spot.
I'll just point to them.
Okay. Just so we get a clear.
The paving notches right about here.
So you're able to turn the truck around at that point?
Yeah, well, right now we plow there and then we turn around in the big cul-de-sac.
Okay.
You use the turnaround, Mark, you use this turnaround?
Correct.
You use their turnaround. So you basically plow part of their property.
No, we kind of live beside.
As you're going through it, well, since you're there.
They're on top of it.
Yeah, because just for the board, this is the QVC gatehouse that's back here. It's back in this area, is where the gatehouse is for entering QVC. So you have to come through and you come to the gatehouse back here.
I mean, perhaps one option too, so if it did get too complicated, I mean, we can certainly explore the 3 property owners, because I understand the legal side of it. So one other option is if you made it similar to that, where you did put the guardhouse where we talked about where the B is, and you provided an easement beyond that for the township to be able to turn around. You could do that too. And we hadn't had this discussions go that far.
Yeah,
But-
that's a thought.
But you have to still vacate a portion of Granite
Yeah,
Park, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not going to change it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it'll solve that neighbor issue.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Sean, would you have an interest in this?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we want to work with you. We don't want you putting up 5 security gates or whatever else. It doesn't make sense. We've no vested interest in maintaining this particular road. I just don't want to do the option that's creating an ordinance that opens up to legal exposure of degrading someone's value and being taken to Commonwealth Court. So if you can either make it work through you coming up with an agreement for these other 3 abutting properties, or plan B being we'll revert back to it, the gatehouse being on our properties only and giving us an easement to plow the road, then I would be okay with it, either one.
What's your thoughts, Nate?
I agree with Mr. Hellman and Mr. Walsh.
Okay, I do too. Okay. Any other questions from the board or comments? Any public comments or questions regarding this topic? Okay.
So, Madam Vice Chair, what I heard was Teva Pharmaceutical and their representatives are going to do the legwork to reach out to the abutting property owners and see if they're amenable and report back to the board.
Correct.
Yes,
Thank you.
And other than that, we would look at discussing the other option.
Reducing the
Yep.
So let's do the legwork with the neighboring property owners, and then we can, Mr. Robinson can circle back at the staff level, and then we can come back to the board.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. White.
I would just thank the township for supporting Teva Pharmaceutical. It's an honor to have them in our township. They're a fantastic company. Just wanted to say that. Thank you. It's an honor to have you.
Okay. 5, let's move on to number 6 on the agenda, which is we're going to have a hearing now for the conditional use application number 4, 2024 for 1201 Ward Avenue, located in the IC Industrial Commercial Zoning District, proposing to modify the conditional use approval previously granted to increase the maximum number of dwelling units from 150 to 154. And would you like to start?
Madam Vice Chair, the solicitor is handing out an exhibit packet. And this gentleman, Cameron, I apologize, I forget your last name. Wilson is here on behalf of the applicant from Riley, Riper, Holland, Cogrega.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson.
And before I begin, I'll pass out the applicant's exhibit packet.
And I'll just start while he's doing that. So this is a public hearing. We do have a court reporter here. So Jim is taking down everything that's said. So this is a conditional use application. The property owner is Westchester, PA, Senior Property LLC. They are the owner of a 8.78 acre parcel located at 1201 Ward Avenue, which is Chester County Tax Parcel 52-3-608. The property has an approximately 55,316 square foot independent and assisted living facility, which had previously been approved in a conditional use decision in order on January 14th, 2015. The particular use was approved under section 84-41A14L, as in Larry. And what applicant now is doing is seeking the board to amend condition number 5 of the 2015 conditional use order, which had a condition limiting the maximum number of dwelling units to 150. The applicant now seeks to convert what is now common space in the building to 4 additional independent living units, so there will be a total of 154 units. The board exhibits that the board has in front of them, the first board exhibit is B1, which was the conditional use application filed on May 20th, 2024. Board exhibit 2 is an email from applicant's counsel indicating that tonight's hearing is being timely held under the MPC. Board 3 is the proof of publication. Tonight's hearing was advertised in the Daily Local News on July 1st and July 8th, 2024. The fourth exhibit is the affidavit of mailing. So Shelby Smith mailed notice of tonight's hearing to property owners within 500 feet of the particular property which is the subject of the application, and that is her affidavit showing the list of property owners who received that mailing. Board Exhibit 5 is an affidavit of posting and photographs of the posting that was conducted on July 9th, 2024, and again completed by the zoning officer, Shelby Smith. Board 6 is a copy of the conditional use decision and order that I referenced that the applicant is seeking to amend Condition 5. Board Exhibit 7 is the plan that accompanied the application, and it was prepared by Edward B. Walsh and Associates Incorporated, and it's identified as Merrill Gardens at Westchester, and the plan is dated May 6, 2024. Board Exhibit 8 is a revised floor plan that shows the specific location of where they would retrofit common space into 4 dwelling units. Board Exhibit 9 is just an aerial tax map to show the board where the property is located in relationship to other parcels. And Board Exhibit 10 is the minutes from the West Goshen Planning Commission meeting of June 11th, 2024, where the Planning Commission recommended approval with no conditions, and that was 9 votes yes and 0 votes opposed. So because this is a conditional use hearing, I need to ask if there's anybody in the audience that owns or leases property in close proximity and wishes to be recognized as a party. Okay, the record should reflect that nobody in the audience is requesting party status. Mr. Wolfson, do you have any objection to the admission of Board Exhibits 1 through 10?
No objection, but I would like just to comment. On Exhibit 8, there was a typo. Rather than first floor common space, that should say second floor common space. And where it says second floor common space, that should say third floor common space. We have provided an updated exhibit with the applicant's bill.
Great, thank you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wolfson, and he can present his case, and we can open up if there's any questions from the public.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Cameron Wolfson from Riley, Riper, Hall, and Collegreco. We are attorneys for the applicant. And with me tonight is Scott Haynes, the applicant's representative. We are here tonight to request an amendment of a prior conditional use approval for an existing and currently operating independent and assisted living facility known as Merrill Gardens. The subject property is located at 1201 Ward Avenue and situated in the IC Industrial Commercial District. As you probably know, the IC District permits independent and assisted living facilities pursuant to conditional use approval by the Board of Supervisors. In 2015, the previous owner of the property obtained conditional use approval to operate the independent and assisted living facility subject to certain conditions, including a condition that a maximum of 150 dwelling units be permitted at the facility. The purpose of our application tonight is to convert 2 underutilized workspace areas into 4 additional units, thereby increasing the maximum permitted dwelling units to 154. As you will hear from our witness shortly, the presence of the underutilized workspace areas limit resident interaction, and by repurposing the work areas into additional dwelling units, the applicant can enhance social interactions among residents and improve their mental well-being. Without further ado, I'd like to swear in our first witness, Scott Haynes.
Raise your right hand. Swear the testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help you God, so you affirm.
I do. Mr. Haynes, why don't you just sit up in the front seat, that way the board can see you.
Why don't we, do we have another speaker we can provide him also?
If you like.
I mean, microphone? Okay. It'd be easier to have 2, I think.
Bless you.
Bless you. Mr. Haynes, can you please provide your name and business address?
Scott Haynes. Business address is 1938 Fairview Avenue, Suite 300, Seattle, Washington, 98102.
Can you please describe your relationship to the applicant, Westchester, PA Senior Property, LLC?
Yes, R.D. Merrill Company owns Merrill Gardens, and Pillar Properties. Merrill Gardens is our senior living operating arm, and Pillar Properties is our development, construction, and multifamily arm. Artie Merrill owns this property in a JV, and I work for all three.
Can you describe your professional experience and background?
Yeah, I've worked for this company for coming on 18 years in October. I've managed the development and construction of just over 30 senior living and multifamily projects ground up, as well as several dozens and dozens of additions and refresh, remodel work across our communities over the United States. We have ebbed and flowed with count of communities, anywhere from 40 up to 72.
Is Exhibit A3 a copy of the deed to the property between CSW Arbor Square 1 LP and Westchester PA Senior Property LLC, recorded in the office of the Chester County Recorder of Deeds on August 8th, 2018 in Book 9793, page 31, evidencing that the applicant is the legal owner of the property that is subject to the application?
Yes.
And are you authorized to speak and appear and make representations tonight on behalf of the applicant?
Yes.
Referring to Exhibit A4, an aerial of the property, please generally identify the location of the property, the existing improvements, and surrounding uses.
Sure. You want me to point it up on the screen, or?
Yeah, if you could bring that up, Brian, thank you.
Yeah. So our community, our front entry is right here off Ward. Our building is H-shaped, surrounded by parking, and of course the airport is just to the other side.
Does the applicant currently operate an independent and assisted living facility on the property known as Merrill Gardens?
Yes.
And can you please briefly describe to the board what Merrill Gardens is?
Sure. Merrill Gardens is a senior living operator, owner, developer. We specialize in senior living all the way from independent living to assisted living, and then memory care, Alzheimer's.
And how long has Merrill Gardens been operating the facility at 1201 Ward Avenue?
Merrill Gardens has been operating the facility since 2022. I'm sorry, 2020. We closed on the property with our partner in a JV in 2022.
And is the subject property approximately 8.78 acres?
Yes.
Is the property located within the IC Industrial Commercial District?
Yes.
Are assisted and/or independent living facilities permitted in the IC district as a conditional use pursuant to Section 84-41.A, paren 14, paren L of the West Goshen Township zoning ordinance?
Yes.
And referring to Exhibit A5, the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors conditional use written decision and order dated January 14th, 2015, was the property previously approved to be used as an independent and assisted living facility?
Yes.
Does Condition 5 of the prior decision provide that the facility shall be limited to a maximum of 150 dwelling units?
Yes.
And is the applicant seeking tonight approval from the Board of Supervisors to amend the previous decision to increase the maximum permitted dwelling units on the property from 150 to 154?
Yes.
And did you direct the preparation of Exhibit A6, existing versus proposed floor plans prepared by JRP Architects?
Yes.
Brian, do you mind bringing that up on the board? Perfect. Can you provide the board with the details on the proposed increase in dwelling units at the facility?
Yes. So on our second floor, again, apologize for the typo. On our second floor, this area highlighted in red is currently a underused, I'm going to say not used, shy floor residence. Common area space that was originally set up as a dining room. However, we as Merrill Gardens offer anytime dining within the building. We have 3 different dining venues on our first floor. And so this space has become a space where, again, 4 to 6 residents at any given time will isolate themselves. Our communities are very much driven in community and living and communicating and engaging in activities. And this particular building has so many of these little awkward offshoot common areas. It's very difficult for us to make sure we're engaging all of our residents. So our proposal here is to convert this space into 2 units. And then on the 3rd floor, this is another underutilized area that really tends to collect dust and is not doing a whole lot. So our end goal is give our residents the opportunity to be down on the 1st floor in a vibrant atmosphere with other residents, our team, of course our team's throughout the building, and then it gives us an opportunity to serve 4 more families. What we do is, I'm very passionate about it, 18 years doing this, so our team has a big impact on our residents and their families, so it gives us a ton of upside.
Thank you. You already touched on this briefly, but just to clarify, the change in circumstance from the original approval in 2015 indicates that the applicant has realized these underutilized workspaces are preventing resident interaction, and it's your belief that by converting those into 4 units that it will improve the well-being of the residents at the facility?
Absolutely.
And in your opinion, will the proposed additional dwelling units adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the facility's residents or the residents of the township?
No, not at all.
Will there be any proposed development on the site outside of the building as part of this project?
No.
Will any new employees be added to the facility as part of this project?
No.
Did you direct the preparation of Exhibit A7, Conditional Use Plan, prepared by Edward E. Walsh Associates, Inc., dated May 6, 2024?
Yes.
Does the plan include a zoning table showing compliance with the area and bulk regulations for assisted and/or independent living facilities in the IC district pursuant to Section 84-41.B(4)?
Yes.
Is parking for the facility governed under condition number 4 of the prior decision, which provides that the off-street parking calculations shall be based on the ratio of 0.75 spaces per independent living unit and 0.5 spaces per assisted living unit, as well as 1 space per employee on the maximum shift?
Yes.
How many parking spaces are required with the increase in independent living facilities?
123 spaces.
And how many parking spaces exist on the property today?
157.
In your experience operating the facility, is there sufficient parking on the property?
Yes, plenty.
And did the West Goshen Planning Commission unanimously recommend approval of the conditional use application at its meeting on June 11th, 2024?
Yes.
Have you had an opportunity to review the standards for conditional uses set forth in the zoning ordinance outlined in Section 84-75?
Yes.
And in your opinion, to the extent applicable, will the proposed changes comply with those standards?
Yes.
Is the proposed increase in the amount of units de minimis and therefore not expected to impact the capacity of the road network providing access to the site?
Yes.
Is the interior traffic circulation adequate to provide safe and convenient circulation for the additional residents, visitors, and including the additional four dwelling units proposed as part of this application?
Yes.
And does the facility provide safe and convenient pedestrian access and internal circulation within the grounds, particularly for points of access from the facility to the parking areas?
Yes.
Will the increase in dwelling units impact the adequacy and availability of sanitary sewer facilities and capacity within the public sanitary sewer system?
No, these areas have sinks, a couple toilets, floor drains, so no, minimum if anything.
Got it. That's all the questions I have for Scott. I ask that the exhibits be accepted into the record, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, does the board have any questions? To start off with.
Yeah, I have one question. So on the original conditional use decision and order in January 2015, this condition number 5, that the applicant should be limited to a maximum of 150 dwelling units. Is there any information as to why that condition was included in this decision?
I know it was a controversial application, and I know that there were a lot of people that felt it was not appropriate because of the airport, and I don't know if that was part of it, that just to make it so that there weren't, there was an overall limit on the number of dwelling units. It's the only thing I can remember.
That's our understanding as well. We don't have any information as to why they set the specific number of 150, but we believe it was regarding the safety of the residents and the location of the airport. But we can also ask Scott, have you ever had any issues with residents regarding the airport location and walking on the airport or any dangerous activities?
No, not at all.
It probably was the number of units that were being proposed, and the board at the time felt that, okay, we'll allow it, but we want there to be a cap on the total number of people that potentially would be living there, I think was the concern. And I do know that there was a lot of people, in fact, the airport themselves, I think, were in attendance. I think there were just people that were worried that this population, it wasn't necessarily a good fit to be a neighbor of the airport, I think was a concern, is what I recollect.
Just to repeat probably what you've already said, the 4 additional units are all for independent living, not for memory care or assisted living needs. Is that correct?
It's for personal care needs. So these will be licensed as personal care, assisted living, not memory care.
Okay.
Okay, Nate, did you have a question? Okay.
So I have a follow-up to that. I don't mean to interrupt, but does that mean there will only be one person residing in each of the new dwelling units?
Correct. A 2-bedroom could be a husband and wife. Pretty rare.
So then that's a no. So that each of these units could potentially have more than one person in them?
Yes.
Okay. But the maximum in each unit would be 2? It would be a husband and wife?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other?
I just have a question. In the township zoning ordinance is 84-41 regarding retirement community development. It says no application for approval of a retirement community development shall be considered or approved unless the following conditions
I'm
are
sorry,
met.
can you say that again?
This is in chapter 84-41, the IC Industrial Commercial District zoning ordinance. It states, which section is that specifically? This is just for clarification. I guess it's F2B. It says no application for approval of retirement community shall be considered or approved unless the following conditions are met. And in B, it says not less than 40% of development tracts shall be designated as and used exclusively for common open space. Ownership, location, design, layout, maintenance of the common open space shall be consistent with the following criteria as a bunch of criteria. This is not going to impact it in any way, correct? I mean, this is, even though it's called a common area, this is not what you would call your common open space, is that correct?
Correct. It's common area space, but it won't affect what you just read as far as how much of it we have to have.
John, yeah, that section doesn't apply. So a retirement community is a use that's allowed under paragraph J, which is a different use than an assisted or independent living facility. So the section you were reading is specific to a retirement community.
This is not considered a retirement community?
No, it's considered an assisted and or independent living facility.
Nevertheless, the common open space will not be impacted by this project.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? Board? Okay, go ahead, Kristen.
A couple questions. So, Mr. Wolfson, did you have a chance to look at carefully through the January 2015 decision to see if there's any other findings of fact that are changed in any manner?
I did, and in my opinion, there are no other.
Okay. And then, I think you testified to this, but I just want to be certain. I know that the ordinance requires 123 off-street spaces. You're providing 157, but on a daily basis, what is the parking situation at the facility in terms of open areas?
Plenty. Majority of our residents don't drive.
Okay.
And today, for instance, I drove to the community right around 1:30, and there's plenty of parking. plenty of parking.
Thank you. I know that oftentimes when ordinances are being developed and we try to determine what an appropriate number of spaces is, we hear anecdotally that, you know, this population doesn't drive, and so it's good to now see, and you're telling us that that is the case, and maybe we hit it right on the target with the parking spaces requirement. So thank you for that. I don't have anything further.
Any other questions or comments from the board at this point? Okay, then I'd like to open it to the public. If the public has any questions, Dr. White? Yes, please come up to the
You have to
podium.
identify yourself for the record.
And talk slow and clear so we can, for our court reporter over here.
Good evening, Douglas White, West Goshen Township. I urge the board to go ahead and approve this. Ms. Camp is correct. This was a little controversial back in 2015. They were concerned about the height of the building being that close to the runway, the population living that close to the runway. But it's there, and they wanted it not too big, so and we felt on planning commission that it would be good use to house additional residents. So I'd encourage the board to go ahead and approve this, as long as you don't make it bigger than the one, because there was some conditions there. But it's there, it's serving a purpose. Please approve it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the board or the public? Okay.
So you can close the hearing, and under the law, you're allowed 45 days to render a decision. This is an application that I would say if the board feels comfortable with, they could render an oral decision right now if they wanted to, or they could take it under advisement and we could prepare a written decision for a future meeting. Yes.
Mr. Kemp, we had nothing came up that required a condition applied on this, right? There was no discussion.
No, I mean, I think it would just be consistent with the testimony and evidence presented tonight, and which would mean that they're locked into the floor, they're locked into, you know, basically the areas of the building that you're saying you're going to retrofit, the parking as shown on the plan. So that would really be the condition. So really the order would be you approve the modification of the January 2015 conditional use and order, specifically condition 5, to impose a maximum limit of 154 units as opposed to 150, subject to applicant complying with all evidence and testimony presented this evening. So that would be an appropriate motion if you wanted to do that. I'm sure they would be fine with you taking the additional time to put that in writing if you wanted to do it that way, whatever is your pleasure.
Okay, would the board like to make a motion tonight, or would you like to wait our 45 days out to specifically increase the dwelling from 150 to 154 as an amendment to the January 14, 2015 development?
I think, personally speaking for myself, I am prepared to approve that tonight.
I agree.
Okay, who wants to make that motion? Okay, who would like to second that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any further discussion with the board on the proposed motion? Okay, hearing none. Is there any public comments or questions? Okay, if not, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposition? Hearing none, no further discussion. Motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
4-0.
I'm sorry, 4-0.
That's okay. And if the record reflect that Ms. Gagne was not here, and Mr. Wolfson, will you waive the 24-hour requirement for me to send you a notice?
Yes.
Okay. I likely will get it anyway, but just in case I don't. Okay, thank you. And I just want to say thank you very much. You did a wonderful job.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Thank you all.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Jim. Do you want it regardless of whether, I mean, I don't need it to write it, but do you want it in your files? The transcript? Yeah, okay. We don't need it in any urgent matter, but they do still want it.
Yeah, for the,
Yeah.
just for the record.
Yeah, thank you.
See you next week.
See you
next week.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Twice.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to our next topic would be number 7. We're going to have a discussion regarding the following applications, which was before the zoning hearing board. Application number 08-2024, which is an application for 920 South Beaumont Associates LP for a property that's actually located at 800 East Virginia Avenue, which is the I-3 General Industrial Zoning District. requesting relief from sections 84-39B, 12, lower B, and lower C. And to start off this discussion, we'll have Shelby start it off, and then we'll have Mr. Nickel. Okay, go ahead, Shelby.
Thank you. Before the board this evening is an application to the zoning hearing board for 800 East Virginia Avenue. The applicant is 920 South Bolmar Associates LP, and the subject property is located within the I-3 General Industrial Zoning District. By way of background information, the subject property was granted land development approval on October 18, 2022 for the construction of a 51,200 square foot warehouse building on the property. The applicant is seeking relief from sections 8439B, 12B, and C of the Township Zoning Ordinance, which requires a 100-foot side yard setback maintained from residential districts. The application is scheduled to be heard before the Zoning Hearing Board next Monday, and the applicant's counsel, Mr. Brian Nagel, is here to discuss the application before the board.
Good evening, Brian Nagel on behalf of the applicant. This is a pretty straightforward dimensional variance request in the industrial, I think it's the I-3 zoning district. And this property is already subject to a approved land development plan. The proposed building is a bit longer. This is an oddly shaped property. It's about 26 acres, more or less. And this is down at the bottom section of it. I don't know if you can zoom in on the satellite image there so we can see 52,531, 52,530, a little bit closer up, which would be, yeah, there you go. So essentially the proposed building, and we can look at the zoning application exhibit, but in terms of the satellite, you see that long, the long building with the gray/black roof. The subject building would parallel that, running down to the...
Would you mind using the pointer, Mr.
Sure.
Nickel? Thank you. Just to clarify a little bit easier for us.
You know I'm not very steady with this pointer, but I'll do my best.
Okay.
So the subject building would come down through here. All of the property in here is already developed, and the subject land development application utilizes the area bulk applied to that whole 26-acre area. My client owns this property, which used to be an occupied residential dwelling. It's now vacant. The only thing that requires the relief here is the fact that this could be used residentially as a rental property by my client. That triggers the 100-foot setback. But in reality, on the plan, you have 113 feet from the edge of the building to this property line here that's not owned by my client, that is used residentially. So that's really the only reason that the variance is needed here. There are other properties in this area actually that have been developed without adherence to this setback provision. But nevertheless, if the variance is granted by the zoning hearing board, and I would ask the board of supervisors just to take no position on this, then you're going to have a 100-foot setback from this property line to the subject building. Because my client owns this property, it's vacant now. So the only thing that would really even, right now, the only thing that makes this property, it's industrially zoned. The only thing that triggers this provision is the fact that there's a residential dwelling that could be rented out to a tenant by my client. They own that property. So that's really what, and maybe Shelby, if you have the zoning plan, or Brian could put that up.
That plan doesn't show you the 100-foot though. You don't have to mention that anywhere. It's a little confusing to follow that.
Yeah, I had asked our engineer about that. I'm going to have him put that on for the zoning hearing Monday night. But if you could zoom in a little bit, Brian, on this side of the plan. So this is the property I was pointing out on the satellite view that has the residential dwelling, the residential home that's vacant.
And it also shows the old owner, so that's what, again, was sort of confusing when you were looking at this. That shows the old owner.
Correct. I know. I agree with you. And I assume that's just because lately I don't know when that acquisition was made, but lately the mapping department and everything has been slow getting these updated. It's not like it used to be. So but you can see here, can you zoom in just a little bit more, Brian? Hopefully it doesn't blur up on us. So there's really nothing in this area anywhere that's an existing natural state. It's all been utilized industrially, developed. Even this property that was occupied as a residential dwelling has a lot of fill and other things that have been placed on the property. But you can see from the proposed building, you have 43 feet to that property line. And then if you extend that out, this is somewhere in the neighborhood, this is about 60 feet. You end up with a total of 113 feet to this residential utilized property. So that complies with the spirit of the ordinance. So it's a pretty minor de minimis variance that's being requested here. Happy to answer any questions that members of the board have.
What do you have right now, what kind of a buffer do you have right here? Is there any vegetation, any trees, or anything that separates the proposed building here from the...
Not really.
Property here that's vacated?
Not really, Mr. Hellman. I mean, we can pull up a satellite. There's some, in the last 6 or 7 years, there was fill placed in here. That may have grown in to some extent with some just weeds and stuff like that, but nothing of significance. Obviously, with the development project, that'll all be cleaned up and you have a drive aisle coming through that area.
So there's set to be no buffer at all between the proposed building and the vacated building?
There's 43 feet of space. There'll be some finished area on the edge, but not anything of significance. You can see the drive aisle is right here. So you have this space in here, which is probably about maybe 12, 15 feet.
Do they plan on renting it out, the vacant house?
I wouldn't say that they plan on renting it out. I would say that they're reserving their right to do that.
Okay.
As of right now, I'm not aware of any plans to rent it out. They want the flexibility to do that should they decide that's a good move for them.
Why did they purchase it?
Yeah,
Was it something in relationship to this, were they concerned about the development and its impact, or was it just another acquisition for property's sake? If you know.
I really don't know the answer to that question, although from talking to my client, I believe when this became available and they had this development going on, this neighbor had raised issues in the past. And with owning this property, that concern goes away. So I would imagine that played a part in their decision to acquire that property.
So it was recently acquired?
I believe so.
Okay.
Recently, last couple of years.
Okay.
So you said there's a land development plan that's been approved?
Correct.
Are we talking about this building? I mean, what's been approved?
There's an approved land development plan, Sean, that has a, can you just zoom out on this?
Here's the approved plan.
Yeah, so it has as I was saying before, the approved plan, this is a 51,200 square foot building. The proposed building is about, I think, 5,200 square feet larger than that, but it's narrower, so it kind of extends like this, and it's longer. And it creates, instead of this odd loading situation on the side of the building that's kind of not ideal in terms of getting the loading areas, it creates a loading area down here along the bottom of the building, and so this becomes loading back here instead of this over here.
I could also elaborate that at the planning commission meeting when they presented this, this building currently from the approved plan is more for one user. It's a single user building. The proposed building, the new application can be broken into multiple users that can access from the rear or for individual users, so they can partition it off like other buildings are in the township for businesses.
And like for the buildings on this side, presumably, too?
Probably, yes. So the old building was a single-user building, the new building is a multi-user building.
I would also just point out that the overall, in terms of the overall approximately 26-acre development, even with this proposed project, the maximum impervious coverage allowed is 65%. This project puts the overall site just over 50%, so you're kind of well under on impervious. And then in terms of building coverage, the maximum is 60%, and proposed with this added to the overall site, you're still only at just under 25%.
So the previous plan development, plan that had been approved didn't have this zoning issue with the 100-foot setback, correct?
Correct. Or if it did, it wasn't raised, I would say.
So,
Mr. Walsh, I did go back and look at the review comments that were issued by Mr. Craig when this was going through the review process, and he did note the setback requirements in this zoning district as part of his review. So it was in his review comments, and it was adhered to as it was going through the review process, based on my review of the records. But this is from looking at it, the building was, and I didn't mean to interrupt or cut anything off.
No.
The building appears to be different than what was approved previously in 2022, just based on looking at what Mr. Kolakowski has put on the screen from the original approval versus what's in the exhibit packet for the zoning hearing board.
Correct. This building that you see here is the subject of a new land development application that was filed.
And that has not come before the board yet.
Mr. Kolakowski.
So if the zoning hearing board grants the dimensional variance, this will have to go through land development approval. And that application was filed, and when it was filed, I believe your staff raised this issue, which is what prompted the applicant to call me and have this variance application prosecuted.
So just so I'm clear, Kristen, this requirement for this setback is to a residential property or a residential zoned area?
Both residential district or residential use.
So it's a residential use that means why they need to get this relief. Okay.
Yeah. One of the things I thought about is maybe because they own it, maybe have something in the something recorded that just identifies to that potential future owner that this situation exists. Just so that you don't have, if the current owner decides to sell it, or even the tenant can come in and say, well, why did you grant this? I mean, and I have no idea how the board feels, but just so there's some notice of the fact that, you know, hey, this was approved, and you should be on notice of the fact that there isn't a buffer. I don't know. That's just some of the things I thought about.
This particular applicant doesn't sell property very often, so
well, you never know. But I mean, you just said they might lease it. You said they might lease it, and what happens is that the tenants then come in and say, board, why'd you do this? I'm harmed by it, I'm bothered by this, I don't like people. I don't know. I was trying to think of a way that if there was any conditions the board wanted to see, that maybe that's something that, again, I don't know how, not everybody reads their deed, not everybody reads their title, so I don't know how effective it is, but at least then we took an extra step. I don't know.
I'll say that I think a condition that if it's going to be leased to a residential tenant, that they be notified of the variance would be a fair condition.
What would happen if down the road, this is all goes ahead, there's nobody in there in this residence now, it's not leased out, and the owner then demolishes the property and wants to put some further development in that particular area, and now wants another variance on the setback to the next home?
Then that would have to be separately evaluated by the township.
Zoning hearing board. And so now that they've granted it once when it was a residence, is there any issue?
No, because the facts are different, the properties are different, the impact is different.
So there's no precedent?
No, I don't think there's a precedent. No.
Okay.
No.
I agree with
every people always say that, oh, if it's granted once, it has to be granted. Every application, I mean, the elements of a variance are very, very specific to evaluating the property, which is the subject of the application, and what its unique circumstances and topography and all that. So it really should never serve as a precedent unless the two applications are basically the circumstances of the properties are identical.
Okay, so if the zoning hearing board denies it, then the property owner could just demolish the house, build it as is, and say, well, it's no longer needed.
Right,
okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Has there been any contact between your client and the resident at 209 Collins?
That's a good question. I'm sure the answer is yes, but I don't know for sure. But I know from working with this client that they're good about talking to the neighbors.
But you don't know that they've done that?
No, but I will definitely check on that before the hearing on Monday, Mr. Holland.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from the board members? Okay, go ahead, Brian. Oh,
So,
Brian, I'm
John,
sorry.
I can tell you from going through sitting through the approval process back in 2022, yes, the
I know
residents.
back in 2020, I recall.
Yes,
that.
because there was design criteria and elements placed on Kimes Avenues for those residents.
I
for them.
understood, but I just, this
As
is
far
something
as
different.
this, they would have gotten notice of the hearing.
For the zoning board.
Yes, they were notified that the hearing
I
happened.
just wondered if there was any prior contact between your client.
We had also
and
met
two of them.
with the applicant before the process of the application for the zoning hearing board, and he noted that he did reach out. I don't know, I didn't ask many questions about that, but
I
he
just
did
wondered
know.
what the interaction
Okay.
consisted
So it's
of.
aware of it at least?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where if there was any response, I don't know, but he did note that, because I asked that question too.
Okay. Any more comments, Brian?
Just
Shelby?
Just to be neutral.
Okay, neutral. Okay, leave it neutral at this point, and I guess we'll see how the zoning hearing board goes, meeting on July 22nd, 2024.
Does the board want to recommend a condition to the zoning hearing board regarding notification that was discussed earlier?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yes,
So
I do
if
too.
the property
I
is
agree.
retained as a residence, that the resident has to be notified that the setback is doesn't meet your criteria.
Should we have, Shelby, are you comfortable delivering that recommendation?
That should actually be voted on then. There should be a motion made to recommend that the zoning hearing be asked to impose that as a condition.
I'll make the motion to impose that condition, or to ask for that condition be imposed at the zoning hearing board.
Would somebody like to second that motion? Any further discussion with the board on the proposed motion? Okay, any public comment or questions relative to that? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, no further discussion, motion passes by a vote of 4-0.
And let me just ask on the record, Mr. Nagel, you indicate that the applicant would agree to that condition?
Well, I indicated that I think it's a reasonable condition.
You need to ask your client.
I need to check
Yes,
with my
understood.
client, but I would be surprised.
Understood, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you'll get back to us, or Kristen.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it can be dealt with at the zoning hearing board, because if they accept it, then that's wonderful. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Nagel.
Good night.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 8, public hearing and possible approval of ordinance number 9, 2024, amending chapter 74, which is taxation of the West Goshen Township Code of Ordinances pertaining to the certificate deadlines for the township's volunteer tax credit program. And this was a program that was obviously approved in the past, but we did have a change with the deadline as a result of certain issues that came aboard. Would you like to address this, Chris?
Yes, Madam Vice Chair. So before the board this evening is proposed ordinance number 9-2024, which would amend Chapter 74 of the Township's Code of Ordinances. Specifically, this ordinance would amend the deadline for the certification of qualifying volunteers, both in terms of when the chief of each agency must submit the list and when the board must certify the list. Currently, the code establishes a requirement that the agencies must submit their list by January 15th of each year, and they must be certified by the board by March 1st. Now, this has presented issues, particularly on the earned income tax side. What occurs with the earned income tax rebate is we will get a spreadsheet from Keystone Collections Group. We'll populate that spreadsheet, and then it gets turned over. And those don't come out until around October of each year. We did some research and looked at the deadlines for other municipalities and found that most have them in the third or fourth quarter of the year. So the proposed ordinance that is before the board would shift the deadlines to October 15th and November 15th respectively. This would go into effect in January 1st of 2025. The proposed ordinance was advertised in the July 8th, 2024 edition of the Daily Local News as required, as well as posted on the township website in the ordinances and resolutions section. And I believe Ms. Camp has some exhibits.
Yeah, just we do have the proof of publication to offer because this is a public hearing. So that was Board Exhibit 1. As Mr. Bayshore indicated, it was advertised on July 8th, 2024. And then I also sent a copy of the ordinance on July 3rd, 2024 to the Chester County Law Library and the Daily Local. So that's required by the second-class township code.
And Madam Vice Chair, I will also note that I did notify the chiefs of each agency that served the municipality. I did not receive any responses from them, but we did discuss this at the last Fire and EMS Coalition meeting, and no one seemed to have any objection to this change.
Right, okay. I just had one comment regarding the ordinance itself, Ordinance 9, 2024. In section 74-58, I just thought that we should clarify instead of just the chief, I thought we should put the fire chief, because we have a lot of chiefs around. Just wanted to make it clarify.
If you read the whole ordinance in its context, though, I think you
it's
realize
clear
that
enough.
it's chief. I mean, I don't have a problem if you want to do that, but I
Okay.
think because it's out of context, you're not reading the whole section, chapter 74.
Let me check We'll just check the E-code definition real quick.
Okay.
You're going to watch. That section.
Well, he's checking that. Is there any other comments from the board relative to this document, Nate?
Yeah, I just think that if any of this will help the volunteers, we should go ahead with it.
Okay. While he's doing that, any comment from the public on this?
Nonprofit.
Yeah.
So, Madam Vice Chair, the definition of chief in the code states as follows: the top ranking or commanding officer in a fire department or a nonprofit emergency medical service agency. This definition shall include acting chiefs during periods of transition. So I think that adequately covers both
that's
agencies.
fine. I'm in agreement with that.
I'll make a motion to adopt the ordinance number 9, 2024.
I'll second.
Is that okay? Any further discussion with the board on the proposed motion? Any public comments or questions on the motion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, no further discussion. Motion passes by a vote of 4-0. Okay. Moving on to item number 9. Okay, which is possible authorization, discussion and possible authorization to advertise a proposed amendment to West Goshen Township zoning ordinance pertaining to the requirements for fences. And you want to start this off, Chris?
Yes, Madam Vice Chair, and then I will turn it over to Shelby to elaborate a little bit further. So before the board this evening is a proposed ordinance amendment to the township zoning ordinance pertaining to the requirements for fences. By way of background information, the board adopted ordinance number 6-2022. That should say November 1st of 2022. This amended certain criteria for fences in the township zoning ordinance. The township zoning officer, Shelby Smith, recently brought to our attention certain issues with the administration of the criteria of this section of the zoning ordinance. Specifically, language pertaining to through lots has created an issue with property owners since they have frontage on 2 streets, which creates the situation of having 2 front yards. Additionally, the township engineer, Brian Kolakowski, has also recommended an amendment pertaining to the placement of fences or walls and easements. Proposed language would prohibit the installation of a fence or wall in a manner that would be in an easement or disrupt the natural flow of water. One of the issues specifically related to through lots is the ordinance states specific streets, such as Pottstown Pike, 322, Westchester Pike, probably the major thoroughfares. Is that correct, Shelby?
Yeah, so the ones listed is Pottstown Pike, Paoli Pike, Westchester Pike, and then US routes 322 and 202.
So essentially, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, those properties that abut those specific streets don't have to meet the requirements where they could have, say, a 6-foot fence in that yard, whereas every other through lot, so every corner property, such as the ones that Shelby is showing up on the map, do have to meet those corner lot requirements. So this amendment would just make all through lots follow the exact same criteria. And then just for housekeeping purposes, the proposed ordinance is amendment to the zoning ordinance, so it would need to be reviewed by both the county and the township's planning commission, and if authorized for advertisement, given the 30-day time period. it could be considered by the board at the August 20th, 2024 board meeting.
So as Chris mentioned, the way our ordinance is currently written is any property that fronts two streets that do not touch are considered a through lot. So in using the Applegate development, this property here has frontage on Applegate and a frontage on South Five Points, both of which are considered front yards per our ordinance. For this property owner to fence in their backyard, it would either have to be a 4-foot fence back here, or it would have to be in outside of the setback for a 6-foot fence, because they do not abut one of those 6 streets. This would allow these properties right here to allow them to have that 6-foot fence back here on the rear of their property. The other additional words that we put in were no fences and easements across swales. What else did we write? No fence shall impede the natural flow of water in any water course, ditch, swale, or cross an easement. And then we put that same exact language in for walls. But the biggest portion that we're seeing a lot of is the through lot fences to allow them to enclose the yard.
Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the issues with the easements have come about in Greystone, correct?
Correct.
Just a thought here. I had to read that section a couple of times just to understand exactly what's being said here in section 1, G2. Notwithstanding subsection G1, above fences may be erected in a required front yard of a through lot, provided to meet the following criteria. And then section C was the fence shall be erected in the rear of the building. It just seemed odd the way it was written. Can I just throw this out and see what you think? Maybe change the verbiage a little bit to say, fences may be erected in a required frontage of a through lot in the rear of the dwelling, provided they meet the following A and B, and just write C. Does that make sense?
They're all defined terms though, like front yard is a defined term, but I'd have to look at that and then look at the definitions, to be honest. And the why it's goofy is because we were solving a problem about the through lots. There was, I think it was the application that came in for the cemetery property, or it was a property where it was a through lot. Or no, you know where it was? It was right by behind where I live. And I don't remember the name of the development, on Pottstown Pike next to the Western Saddlery. Those people who backyards abutted Pottstown Pike wanted to put a higher fence as a buffer. I'm not remembering the name of the development. You know, I'm talking about right between Burke Road and Kirkland on Pottstown Pike going towards Exton. That development, this is where this amendment came in. Those people, there's 4 or 5 homes who have a backyard, but by definition is a front yard because it abuts Pottstown Pike. They wanted to put a fence higher than 4 feet because they needed privacy from the traffic on Pottstown Pike. And so sort of this amendment came in to sort of address that situation. And at the time, the thought was that you only wanted to allow that on what was considered through lots. So, John, I'm not saying we couldn't. No, I'm not saying we couldn't. I'd like to look at your terminology.
And somebody's not a front yard for a back, somehow the front yard there wouldn't be in the back of the building.
So
no, it is by definition. It is in this case.
When Chris and Brian and I started working through this, we are going through that whole zoning code update. So we were looking to make the change that we needed to be done currently, rather than rewrite the entire fence section. If I remember correctly, we were just looking for that.
Well, and honestly, I mean, I think this whole section should be blown up and started over, because when I looked at it, I mean, one of the questions I had was, if you look at the second page of the ordinance, paragraph 4, all fences regardless of height require a zoning permit, and then it says any fence which is 8 feet in height shall require a zoning permit and a building permit. Well, my question is, if it's 8 feet in height, is that allowed? Where is that allowed? Like that seemed confusing to me, and I wasn't sure why. So again, it just seemed, I agree with you, John. It completely is a hard section to understand and read. I'm not doubting that. Yeah, no, as a lawyer, I think it's hard to understand and read. I'm going to be honest with you.
So, John, put the definitions up on the board. Lot front, the line separating the lot from the street. And then through lot is defined, lot in frontage on 2 parallel streets of a lot.
see they used the word frontage there.
Yes.
It might make more sense. But I don't know, just thought I'd think.
Is there such a thing as a corner lot that has 3 streets? And if so, where's the fence allowed then? Is it still the rear of the dwelling, or is it on the side of the dwelling next to the busiest? I mean, how is that determination made?
So corner lots for fences are not regulated under the through lot section, so.
Right, so it's different than.
Yeah, so the through lots are just the
roads.
2. The
Yeah.
corner lots are the 3. And unfortunately with corner lots, all 3 frontages would be considered front
Front
yards.
yards.
So therefore their fence would have to be lower in height to meet section 8447G1 for front yard
One that's
fence.
the rear of the dwelling?
Not the way this code's written, unfortunately, and that was something that we were gonna take a look at during the zoning code update.
And then I had a question regarding section 1, G, or D, 2D. I guess the way it's written right now is the fence shall be erected outside of the existing right-of-way. Does that mean the same thing as the fence shall not be erected on any existing right-of-way?
No, so an existing right-of-way is whatever the right-of-way is for the road upon which the lot abuts. So we don't want fences in what is township right-of-way. It has to be on their
property,
yeah.
outside
Well,
the
I mean,
right-of-way.
it depends. In some circumstances, property owners own the right-of-way, and the township only has the right to use it for purposes of a road. In more recent developments, that's not the case. In more recent developments, when I say recent, 2000 and on, townships started to take roads in fee simple, meaning we own entirely, we own 100% of it. The property line abuts the edge of the right-of-way or what we own in fee simple. Older developments in the township, the deeds run to the center of the right-of-way, and the township just has a right-of-way. So it depends on the development, but the point being that you don't want a fence in what is township, potentially where a road is or drainage, things like that.
So in your development, I know from doing past research, the road right-of-way is outside of people's property. So those deeds do not go to the center of the road. The township owns it in fee simple. But in Mr. Hellman's neighborhood, given the age of when those homes were constructed, I believe most of those go into the center line of the roadway.
Okay. So it would not be correct to say the fence shall not be erected on the existing right-of-way, because they can be if the property goes to midway of the right-of-way.
No, I mean,
So
outside of the existing right-of-way. So, well,
So
that's
maybe
where you have
I'll
to look at all the definitions. You have to look at front yards and front yard setbacks and all that.
It's
So
just the way
I can't
it's
answer that question.
written right now is confusing to me. I was trying to figure out that nobody can put basically nobody can put a fence in a right-of-way.
That's the intent,
That's
yeah.
the intent.
Well, that's why I said that's how it should be written then. The fence shall not be erected in any existing right-of-way.
Well, even when you
basically.
have the deed going into the center line of the roadway,
Right.
there's a defined right-of-way width that
Within
the
that.
township has. So they would have to get it surveyed, and then that would define
Right.
where they can put their fence.
Okay. It just seems like it needs more clarification in that D section to me. I don't know.
How do you want it to be worded?
The fence shall not be erected
Same thing.
on the
In
existing
a right-of-way.
in
It's just saying it in the
existing
affirmative versus the
right-of-way.
negative.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
And if John wants to suggest his language, we can take another look at it. I don't want to say that John wants to send me an email and tell me how he thinks it would be. I don't disagree that it could use some wordsmithing to make it
Yeah.
easier to understand. I absolutely agree with that.
Okay. Any further discussion on the board on this topic?
So where are we left at? You're going to provide that language to Kristen, and that's what we're going to
Yeah, I'll send it to you to see whether it's
Sure.
your definition
Yes.
and your.
So we could.
I'm just trying to make this more understandable for a layperson.
Right.
to pick up the code.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. And honestly,
This tells me what I can do and can't do.
and I will tell you that the application for 1126 Grove Road, this came into play and they were confused.
Yeah.
And she raised that
I
as an
can see
issue,
why.
that she was very confused about what she was allowed to do. So I don't disagree that, and I'm just telling you she said that. I'm not saying right or
There's
wrong.
no through lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, no, not the through lot, just the whole fences and mall section.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, before we make a motion to advertise on this, is there any further comment from the board or Shelby or anybody? Okay, any public comment or okay, Mr. Golden?
All right, so
the code reorganization project that's going to be over the next year and a half, someone warned me that, well, this is an opportunity to blow up the code, rewrite the code, and not be part of public opinion or anything. And I'm kind of hearing that there's opportunity to start rewriting and changing the language on this code. And I think the intent of that project was to organize it so things could be found a little bit easier. So, where's the guardrails? What's going to prevent you from just blowing up the code and writing it the way you want now, as opposed to just organizing that code so things, the existing code could be found in a more organized way?
Yeah, shall we want to go ahead and answer?
Yeah, I don't believe that that's an accurate representation of the project that the township is doing.
Yeah.
The township, the board has the right to amend the zoning ordinance at their discretion at any time. It goes through a specific public process as defined by the municipality's planning code. The project that we're doing is because we have a zoning ordinance that was adopted in 1972, as was discussed earlier tonight during the conditional use hearing, and has been amended over the course of time. Traditionally, when you update your comprehensive plan, you then update your zoning ordinance to align with that comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan was adopted in 2019. It hasn't been updated since then. So that's the project we're doing. As these situations come about, and as our staff continues to work on them, we will bring these issues to the board. We've done it, I've been here almost 3 years, we've done it numerous times on a variety of issues. So we're not blowing up the code, we're looking to simplify it, and Shelby or Brian bring items to our attention, we're going to bring it to the board.
Yeah, I think Charlie's concern is it's being done behind closed doors and then just maybe thrown on people. And all these land planning commission meetings, which is doing this zoning rewrite, is all open public meetings and advertised.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah, we welcome your comments, actually.
The scope of the work is defined in an RFP, the winning bid is all available publicly, so if you go back and look at some of the minutes and records, full scope of what the project is fully defined.
We're fully transparent, and going forward, we'll be fully transparent.
Everything is up on the website. Gilmore & Associates was awarded the contract, I believe, at the March 19th meeting. It was either the March 5th or March 19th meeting. Their full proposal is available on the website from that meeting.
Okay. So I'll go back and I'll look at that meeting, but maybe it's my age, but I think I recollect Mr. Kulikowski describing it as things are hard to find. We'd like to reorganize the code so it wouldn't take so much time to find things. And I believe in that very same meeting, there was a comment about not rewriting the text of that code. And I'll go back and I'll check, because I brought that subject up, and I guess the concern is this, that they get done in this year and a half, and a new code pops out, and no one recognizes it. Now all the residents have all new rules, we can't follow anything. And if it's done piecemeal, almost like what is being discussed tonight, if it's done piecemeal, sure, then we can follow it along. Things will get approved piecemeal, then it goes into the new code. But again, I'm kind of looking for what are the defined guardrails for just blowing up the code. Someone said it tonight, just blow it up and let's rewrite it.
That's not an apt description of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Well, I heard it tonight. Someone said, let's just blow it up.
Who said that? This is the first I'm hearing this.
Oh, I thought we were just talking about fences, and boy, this doesn't make sense.
That's one section.
That's one section.
Clarifying one section that routinely Ms. Smith has to interpret.
Yes,
I
do not make a lot of residents happy right now with fences. So
and I think that was, I mean, Brian and the Woodlands, we have 598 new homes coming in, and there's been a lot of confusion by property owners in that development as to where they're allowed to put fences. So I always say that zoning ordinances are living, breathing documents, and as much as you try to account for situations, the Woodlands is a different situation where there's a lot of easements in people's backyards, and how the code impacts the ability to put a fence or a wall over those easements is something that really wasn't addressed and needs to be. Another thing I'll say is that zoning ordinances, I just went to Upper Euclid last night, they're addressing uses that didn't exist 5 years ago. Hookah bars, vapor shops, that kind of thing. So you need to continually update and codify, as changes in the law come into existence for new uses that didn't exist in 1972 when the ordinance was updated, so.
Mr. Goldman, I just want to let you know that the next meeting that we're going to talk about the rewriting of the zoning code is August 19th at 6 here. So you're more than welcome to attend. I'd love the input.
Yeah, I would
And those are all
encourage it.
public meetings, and those agendas are always posted on our website.
And it's on the calendar, on the website, on the westgoshen.org.
Yeah, I would encourage it because the public, including you, has had very good comments that you've added to some of our documents, so I appreciate that.
So, as this process goes, I don't want to take up any more time, but as this process goes, is there a side-by-side document as you go along? Is there the old, and now you have to rewrite the new?
There's a working document. I wouldn't say you would compare them side by side just because here the sections might not be like what is, the R3 might be in 8412. That section might become 8416 just in the organization process. We have a huge supplemental regulation section which includes everything from parking standards to lighting standards to floodplain standards and breaking those things out. So the bulk, you couldn't compare them side by side just because the sections might be different, but the information might still be the same. So it's just kind of a working document that you would go through. Does that make sense?
I have a better understanding, but it is a new understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goldman. Is there any other comments or questions from the public? Okay, we will now vote. All in favor of our motion, please say aye.
Do we have a motion?
Oh, wait, no, you didn't have one. I thought you did.
Yeah, he said we did.
I did. I apologize.
Okay, we will now take the time to make a motion to advertise for.
I suppose you send Kristen some verbiage.
And we'd also need to send it to the county planning and your planning, so I think it might be premature to advertise it. I think you're going to want to see the revision and then see
before we vote on it
what the county planning and what your planning would have input on.
Okay, so we'll hold off the motion.
Yeah, so why don't we just
so we see the
continue to
language.
work on it
Okay.
and then send it to the planning commissions as appropriate. Does that work?
Okay.
Yeah, so why don't we do, if the board is amenable to this, we'll send it to we'll get the language from Mr. Hellman, we'll make the change that Ms. Smith recommended as well.
Right.
We'll send it to the county planning commission, we'll send it to our planning commission, and then bring it back to the board.
Okay, that's great. So we will not vote on this tonight as a result of that.
Right.
Okay. Kristen, you're welcome to leave whenever you want.
Thank you.
And then we'll proceed on to item number 10, which is Chief Mike Carroll's police report for the month of June 2024.
Okay, so tonight
Thank you, Kristen.
Tonight I have two reports, one for the month of June of 2024, and one for the first 6 months of the year. So I'll do the month first. So in June of 2024, we responded to 2,122 calls for service. 56 of those were alarms, and one of those alarms was valid. 56 accidents, 16 of which were reportable. We drove a total of 19,021 miles. In the area of alarm violations, we had one that was the 7th event for that particular residence, and two that were the 6th, and both of those are the maximum fines for those alarms. We performed 22 assists to other agencies for a total of 15 3/4 hours, and we received about 27 assists from other agencies. We performed extra traffic details on Falcon Lane, Paley Pike, and Taylor's Mill Road, Rosary Lane, Hamlet Hill Drive, and West Warren Road, Snyder Avenue, North Five Points Road, and North New Street. We did our normal monthly training, and in addition to that, Officer Ash and Virgilio attended the IPTM conference, which is a collision conference. Lieutenant Grandizio attended LEADS training, which is leadership training. Officer De Leon and Needham attended patrol legal survival training. And Sergeant Spigarelli and Officer Ass attended CPS recertification, which is the safety seats. So that is for the month of June. If you have any questions on that, otherwise I'll move on to the first 6 months of the year.
Well, what's the content of patrol legal survival training?
It's going through common problems that officers come in either through lawsuits or legal issues in prosecuting cases.
Is it a day training?
1 day, yes.
Okay, I noticed Fisher Conane Company had a couple of alarms this month. Is there anything going on there particularly?
They keep setting off their alarm.
Oh, it's false alarms?
Yes,
Okay.
false alarms, yes.
And they're getting fined for them also?
Depending on what number they're on, they are.
Okay. And Levante also had a lot of alarms this month.
Yeah, Rockday's had a problem lately, and we're trying to deal with them.
With their alarm system, or with them? Okay. Okay. Board, any questions, comments?
Yeah, I have one question. Chief, it came up earlier tonight about the traffic along South High Street, and I see under selective enforcement for the month of June, you have South High Street and several intersections there. Lexington, Yorktown, Spruce, Snyder, Church, Rosedale, East Roads, and Gunta. This and High Street. Can you just explain a little bit more what does the selective enforcement mean when you identify them on this report?
So those specific reports are from the traffic unit, so they go to those locations, and depending on the location, if it's a stop sign, if it's a speeding issue, they perform specific enforcement in that area.
Does that mean the patrol car will sit there at that particular intersection for a certain period of time?
Yes, most of the time, yeah.
I mean, for half an hour, I mean, or does it vary?
Depends on how, you know,
But
what the
it's
traffic
identified
lights on the
as a
day.
specific location for them to visit.
Correct.
During the course of it. Do you have any idea how many times they may do that during the course of the month?
At a specific location?
Yeah.
Well, the list of locations is, I don't know, it's probably 50-plus locations. So when they do it, they enter a report, so I can get that information, but I don't have it right now.
Okay, no, I'm just trying to get a feel for how, if it's listed as a selective enforcement intersection, how often is the selective enforcement executed at that particular intersection?
I don't know specifically. It could be a lot, it could be a little, it depends on how many times they get there.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? I had one. Assist other departments went down from 217 to 143. It's not having anything to do with like WEGO not servicing a certain territory anymore, or why the calls went.
In comparison.
For the
to first half of the
comparison.
year last
Well,
year.
yeah, that's true. We're only halfway there, right?
So, no, specifically as to why, I don't know.
Okay. So that's what it comes out to, like 74 less calls. Okay, just wondering why. Okay. Any more questions for the chief?
I have a question. It appears that our overtime is down considerably. Is that because of the additional 2 officers?
So it's probably not because of the additional 2 officers, because they aren't fully performing the functions that will save us overtime yet. We are down about approximately 15% in comparison to last year, and that's through diligent work from the administration.
Chief, do you have any, well, just on, are you going to go into the 6 month?
Yes. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So for the first half of the year, we responded to 13,122 calls for service, 283 alarm violations, 10 of which were valid, 377 accidents, 124 of which were reportable accidents, and we drove a total of 116,535 miles. And some of the specific things I wanted to point out were the 15% reduction in overtime. We had an increase in call volume from 13,122 this year from 12,781 last year. So I'll certainly take any questions they have.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Okay. Any public comment questions? Yes.
Yeah, regarding the alarms, are they just security alarms, or are they first responder alarms? Like,
No, they're security alarms. So
they're security alarms?
Yes.
So you don't really get notified if it's like a fire alarm?
No, we do, but they're categorized separately.
They're categorized differently. Okay. So, but majority of the alarms are typically procedural issues, probably within a business. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the
Okay.
majority. And that's why there's fines associated with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And they don't like getting fined then.
No, not like it enough.
Yeah.
But our alarms did go down from last year.
Oh, good.
I mean, a decent amount, so maybe it's having.
So, yeah, it's our new fines that we introduced, higher amounts, I should say. Okay, any other questions from the public or comments? Okay, and thank you, Chief. Okay, let's move on to agenda number 11, which is the Board of Supervisors announcements. And I will start with Nate.
All right. June 20th, I attended the tabletop exercise for emergency preparedness with the Chester County Department of Emergency Services that was conducted at the Township Building. June 25th, discussion of acquiring the Westchester Reservoir with Aqua. June 27th, Historic Commission meeting. July 8th, took a tour of the West Goshen Parks with Ken Lair because I wasn't able to attend the group presentation. And July 9th, executive session dealing with Parkway Shopping Center. That's all.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I just had a few. Thursday, June 20th, attended the same tabletop exercise with the Chester County Department of Emergency Services. It was simulating a catastrophic weather event with flooding and loss of power in many areas of the West Goshen Township, and we also tested our communication system. And we will be getting a report back from the Department of Emergency Services and areas of improvement. Then on July the 9th, I attended the Land Planning Committee meeting and also thereafter the Planning Commission meeting. And then on today, on July the 16th, attended along with Tina Marie Smith, our monthly board liaison meeting with the chief. We discussed several issues, including the update on the PennDOT work done on the roads in the township. Also, we talked about accelerated traffic patrols that will be targeting resident speeding drivers. It's occurring now. Will be going on for another week or so. We also talked about coverage for the Goshen Fair that's upcoming. We also talked about summer programs that are ongoing, including the Gumshoe Academy. And we also talked about police budget items for next year. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, John. Sean?
I participated in the tabletop exercise on June the 20th as well. Attended the Parks tour on the 27th of June, and also the executive session on 7/9 to discuss legal matters for the Parkway Shopping Center. That reminded me though, Chief, so the Goshen Fair, have you been satisfied that the coverage there from a police perspective is adequate or up to what you would like to see if it was in our township?
So I can't say that I'm satisfied because I haven't seen the plan yet.
We're only like, 10 days away from this event or a little bit longer?
Less time is good. We have talked to them, told them we would support them in any way they needed. They said they were working on it. We haven't heard.
Okay, that's it, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I had a few announcements. Again, the 620 emergency exercise. On June 24th, I toured the New Haven Behavioral Health Facility with Jeff Hunt, who was the Chief Executive Officer. I also invited him and his staff to start coming to our coalition meetings on a monthly basis. He is part of our community now, and I think if we can help him or he can add something to the meetings, I did invite him to come. SAC meeting was June 25th. We did the Parks tour on June 27th. And on July 3rd, we did a sewer plant tour. Vivo Blend Advanced Liquid Polymer Activation Technologies. In spite of the boring title, it was very interesting. At least I thought it was interesting.
Awesome.
Yes, it was awesome. And then also, on July 4th, I attended the bike parade that West Goshen Township put on, and I was one of the judges, which is a major success. It was very nice. And then on July 13th, the township also sponsored a Stargazers, and we had a community that comes out that does that. They did a great job along with Ken Lear. On July 17th, I attended a CBC fundraiser. And on July 18th, we're going to have our COG meeting. And then I had some township supervisor announcements also. On June 20th, we had, these are all executive sessions regarding litigation, which was the Wawa conditional use appeal. On June 21st, we had another session regarding personnel. And then June 25th, we had another meeting regarding the potential acquisition of real estate. On July 2nd, we had another meeting regarding personnel. On July 9th, we had a meeting regarding the litigation on the Wawa conditional use appeal. And that's it. That's all the announcements we have. Is there any questions? Yes, Mr. Gordon.
Chief Carroll, thank you very much for answering my email this morning. I did get a hold of this with regard to the fair and police coverage.
I did get a hold of, or I did send a message into the West Town Thornbury, but it's not quite as a direct contact as it is getting in touch with you. So my concern is this. Again, with the attempted assassination this past week, obviously people are amped up this year. At the beginning of the year, there were some real problems with some local fairs or local parties, a lot of shooting, and we actually thought that this fair would be canceled this year because if that continued through the summer, this would present quite a risk. My concern is last year I saw a little bit improvement, snow fences out along Route 3 and Ellis Lane, which kind of made people come in really particular places. It wasn't quite the wholesale entry off the Route 3. But for those people who are in Tent 1, and I watch people come into that fair off the parking lot, through the rides, and the police are 50 feet behind me, it's really hard to protect anybody who wants to do trouble from getting right into the fair many different ways. It's wide open. I would say if you look back at the fire station, along that road where the parking cars are, right through where the rides start to blind your vision, there's a lot of exposure there. So if you have an opportunity to work with West Town and Thornbury, I'd like to see snow fences, more directed people, more points of entry where the police can see people coming in. It would just help improve, I think, the whole area instead of it just being wide open, everybody just coming this way.
Have you mentioned that to the township?
I'm sorry?
Have you mentioned your suggestions to the township?
To West Town Thornbury?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, theirs is a different way to apply a message to get in there. Not sure if they're going to see it for a couple of days. Chief Carroll's always more accessible.
Yes, he is, and his staff.
So again, thank you very much for answering these.
Okay, any other questions, comments? No? Okay, we'll move on then. I'd like to move on to agenda item number 12, which is the township manager's announcements. Chris, if you could please share them.
Madam Vice Chair, thank you. I'll hit a few of the high points for announcements for this month, for this past month. The Township's monthly e-newsletter will be issued on July 19th, 2024. In terms of financial matters, the Township's 2023 audit has been completed, and they are scheduled to do a presentation at the next board meeting on August 6th. At the same time, we will do the mid-year budget report as well. I know our Finance Director, Christine Riffey, is working diligently to finalize that. Additionally, we are starting preparation for the 2025 budget. We're going to have our first internal staff meeting coming up in the beginning of mid-August, and then we'll schedule the review of the 10-year capital plan for the second meeting in September, like we've done the last 2 years. Our pension advisor transition, the funds have been successfully transferred from Vanguard to PNC. Ms. Riffey did a full reconciliation of the transfer, and all funds appear to have transferred over accordingly. We are in the process of setting up the automatic transfers with Bryn Mawr Trust, and we are also talking about potential revisions to the Township's investment policy statement for pension funds, and that will be discussed at the next pension committee meeting on July 24th. The last time that was done was August of 2021. We do have a couple presentations coming up for the next few board meetings. I did have the opportunity to meet with the new director of the Westchester Public Library. Her name is Maggie Stanton. She is going to be coming before the board at the September 3rd meeting for the library's annual presentation. And that would line up with when they did theirs in 2023 as well. Additionally, at the August 20th board meeting, we'll have an updated presentation from Loretta Cohen from Westchester Communities That Care. This will be their first presentation to the board since November 1st of 2022. They do contribute to our e-newsletter on a regular basis, but they are going to be coming to do an updated presentation to the board. In terms of 315 Powell Lane, we are continuing through that process and working with the mortgage company. The plans have been recorded. Our solicitor's office has been working with the mortgage company to finalize the partial release so that we can schedule the settlement, and a release document was sent to them on July 3rd. So we're still waiting to finalize that.
How long that might take?
It is in the hands of Chase. The mortgage company is Chase Bank, so it's in their hands. But Kristen's office did send the documentation that they were looking for. As we discussed tonight, our multimodal transportation fund grant application is being finalized by Carroll Engineering, and our plan is to submit that on or before the July 31st deadline. As noted, we have numerous letters of support to accompany our application. And again, I'd like to thank Chief Carroll for providing us with police report information for the last 5 years. I believe the information he provided showed 68 reports in that location related to flooding hazard situations over the last 5 years. So thank you, Chief. And again, thank you to the residents who provided pictures and anecdotes that we're able to include in our application as well. In terms of ordinances, the polystyrene ordinance that was discussed at the, I believe it was at the June 18th board meeting, was discussed by the SAC at their meeting on June 25th in conjunction with the township solicitor. Ms. Camp has prepared a draft ordinance that's been circulated to the SAC, and that's going to be reviewed at their meeting on July 23rd. There is an ordinance amendment pertaining to sidewalks for an amendment to the subdivision and land development ordinance that's been drafted and is currently being reviewed by the township staff. Brian Kolakowski has discussed the proposed ordinance with the solicitor and is looking to ensure that our design criteria is up to date. I believe he's also working on some potential amendments to public street criteria as well to go along with that, and he's been working with Mr. Bertolami on those requirements as well, just to make sure everything is up to date. We discussed the zoning ordinance amendment for fence requirements this evening, and that will be proceeding forward. And the amendment for the Historic Commission for Historic Resources is continuing for their review, and at their most recent meeting, and I'll allow Mr. Woolman to correct me if I'm wrong, there was discussion about possible provisions pertaining to demolition by neglect.
Correct.
And I know our solicitor has looked at some of those requirements and provided examples to the Historic Commission. The Fresh Meadows storm sewer repair is continuing. The Streets Department is finishing up work on Oxford Road. They were intending to move to the concrete curb work this week, but have been delayed in that. So that's actually going to be next week on their itinerary. And to date, they have replaced 550 feet of the CMP with HDPE pipe, and the material, the cost for this material is being charged to the American Rescue Fund. And Mark has been providing me with pictures of the work that they've been doing, and we've been putting it in our monthly e-newsletters. He provides them to us.
Chris, just on that, do you know if Mark has identified the pipe that is to be lined at this point? We kind of put that on hold while he did some more of this work, and then he would have able to identify the full list of where we might need the pipe lining.
I don't believe he's identified that yet, but I will check with him. Okay. We did get, I think I noted last month, we did get the survey plan from Carroll Engineering, and I think Mark is using that to identify the lining candidates, but I can follow up with him. Have you had any discussions with him about lining, Brian?
Not since our last discussion here.
Yeah. So I'll check with Mark.
This was received tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
We can ask him to see that.
Okay. We do have, just to remind the board, we do have a conditional use hearing scheduled for July 24th at 6 p.m. and that is the application for the university for temporary modular housing units that was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their last meeting, and notifications went out to surrounding landowners.
Are we going to need to utilize our conflict counsel for that, do you know?
Yes, the board appointed Ryan Jennings to serve as conflict counsel, and I've kept him apprised of the status of everything and provided him exhibits, so he'll do exactly what Ms. Camp did tonight. And then finally, I will hit on our solar energy array project. We had our first status meeting with TerraSol. I am pleased to report that we did have an issue with our meter being a Park 3 meter, and we couldn't figure out why PECO transitioned us to a higher tier. I received an email today from PECO that we are back down to a Park 2 meter, which is 0 to 100 kW. We did look at the connection into building A, I believe it was. TerraSol has looked into that for us. They're working on an estimate for the tie-in cost of building A. Right now, their rough estimate is $50,000 to $80,000, but they are working on a actual firm estimate.
We don't believe that's going to be necessary based on the Prop 2, right?
It may not be necessary.
Okay.
We are also waiting on the cost for the domestic panels. We don't have that yet. One action item for me that came out of that is I'm going to follow up with PEA regarding the grant application. It was tentative that we might hear something this month, so I'm just going to see if there's any kind of status update on that. And again,
question on the, has the responsible contractor issues been resolved with the electrical subcontractor for that?
the one subcontractor they were going to use would not meet the requirements, so they were still working on that. I believe they said they had about a dozen that they were looking into. So that actually did come up. That came up today during our meeting. So I know Terrasol is working on that. Actually, one other item we're going to have for the North Hill stormwater improvements. We're going to have a meeting with the residents on July 31st. Just to kind of give them a status update on where things stand. Unfortunately, a lot of the material that was provided to help close the deeds was not really fruitful. And again, I want to thank Brian. Brian coordinated that meeting, so I want to thank him for coordinating everything. We've had some delays because of some vacations, but I think we finally got a date that worked for everybody. And then we do a couple community events to go off of the Stargazer event that occurred on July 13th. The Park and Recreation Department does have an event partnering with the Westchester University Department of Earth and Space Sciences at the university's Mather Planetarium, and that is Friday, August 2nd, but unfortunately that event is entirely sold out. And those are all of my announcements. I'm happy to take any questions. I believe I took up enough time, Madam Vice Chair.
That's fine. It's important stuff. Any questions for Chris from the board?
Already asked him, thanks.
Okay. Any questions from the public? Okay. Barring none, we will move on to 13, which is the Township Engineers Stormwater Announcements and Woodlands and Greystone update that Brian will be addressing.
Good evening. A couple stormwater announcements tonight. The first one is for the Basin Road Stream Bank Restoration Project that we're currently evaluating to potentially shift it on the property. The wetland scientist was due to be out on Friday, still past Friday. I have not gotten a report from Carol, so I expect to get that prior to the next meeting. To be able to report back if that project can be considered viable for Stream Bank, or it's just going to be a restoration to open up that Warren Road and let the flow through. But if we can use it as a stream bank restoration, I'll know more by the next meeting. Additionally, I wanted to show you tonight the status of where the Government Services Center Basin project is. So this is the draft landscape plan from Carroll Engineering. I'm going to zoom in here for you. So they did a full color plan that outlined what the project will entail. The flow channels are the orange. You see they're looking to extend the flow for water quality and provide 2 stilling pools in the middle. We're currently at the flat basin. There will be plantings, there'll be seed mixes, there'll be gabion walls at each end. These purple lines are gabion walls, which are your stone walls, to slow the flow of water down to allow it to trickle in so it doesn't wash out the basin. One of the things they showed they wanted to be aware of is this is what the channel looks like during construction, and this is what the channel looks like when it grows in, as far as the channel through the bottom of the basin. The vegetated channel, this is how it looks when you build it, this is how it looks when it's finished. The plans are completed in the final draft form. I reviewed them, made my comments. Carroll Engineering has addressed them. And then I did provide these plans to the Chester County on July 11th. Gave them 30 days to review and get back any comments before we finalize for bidding documents. So if they meet the schedule I've requested, I anticipate being in front of you by the end of August, beginning of September, to request permission to bid this.
We should comment that the county reviews these.
This went to Stan Corbett, their county engineer, who's their MS4 engineer, and then 2 people in their facilities department.
That's a standard process to do that.
It was part of the negotiated agreement that they have the right to renew it. Okay. It's not standard process, but since it's on their, because this project is on their property and we have the agreement for the basin, that was one of the comments that they have the right to renew it. Okay. So, those are the two I have for stormwater updates. You already mentioned that we're going to be meeting with property owners, the affected property owners, about discussing the project, getting some feedback, and also getting their buy-in on the potential easements we need on the properties. So there's 4 properties that we need easements for the current project in North Hills. So that those property owners are who we're going to be meeting with on the 31st. I do not have a draft design yet from Carol. They will have that at that meeting. Additionally, I met for update at Woodlands at Greystone. I met last Tuesday, the 9th, with Ray Grahowski. We went through the open space trails that will be the potential open space that we did that will be considered for dedication to the township. I guess probably 85 to 90% of the original punch list was completed. A few items that have to be outstanding. Him and I are going back and forth right now with what the next punch list is going to be, which I will be issuing by the end of next week. He's currently on vacation this week, so I have to wait to hear from him until he gets back Thursday for my last question. And that's all the updates I have for right now. Oh, Camp Township has no power. So this may be knocking out power that's coming through.
That's right, I haven't had it since this morning, so. Any questions for Brian?
Yeah, you say you're generating a new punch list?
Yes, so the punch list I gave him was probably 100 to 150 items. And there was a lot of individual items on the trail to fix, additional items. And we went through every item on that trail. It took us 3 hours to go through the trails last Tuesday. We went through every item on the punch list. And my estimate is he is about 80 to 5 to 90% of that was already completed. There's items that weren't completed, or if they were completed to my satisfaction. So they stayed on the punch list. So that's where the punch list is now going to be much shorter to go back to them.
Any feel from them as to when they will complete that second?
Ray indicated he'd like to have it done by the time I get back from vacation in August.
Really?
Yes. That was his saying, but
yeah.
I don't know if they can fix everything by then, if his subs can fix everything, if weather will cooperate for the items that can be fixed.
This might not be a fair question, but I'll throw it out anyway. Do you have an anticipated date for when they'll be coming to the board for dedication of the well?
Dedication is up to you.
When would they be coming before the board asking for them to do it? I mean, they have to complete all the punch list, right?
Yes.
So,
if they have the punch list completed, they may try to come before you right away and dedicate the park.
so in other words, what I feel like you is after August or maybe in September, they would be in a position then to come before the board and ask for us to take that care.
They could, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but
There's still
the infrastructure for the phase 6 completion of the.
No. And there's also sections of the trail that are still yet to be completed in phase 6. So there's and also the biggest item that I have concern with for dedication is the dam that has the leaks from when which is dam 184, has yet to be repaired because it's been over a year and DEP has not approved their repair plan yet. So they still have to access that dam with equipment. And currently the only way that I can see they can access it is from North Hills. They may be able to come down from Gershwin, but I don't know if they can get the big enough equipment down that way on the trail.
Number 4 is the one we're going to get.
No.
There. Okay, so that's the
That
HOA.
goes to the HOA.
Okay.
None of the 2 dams that impound water will be ours.
Okay.
So those dams are both will be dedicated, will be turned to the HOA once DEP closes up the permits, and both permits are still open with DEP. Now there is, in the conditional use and on the plan, there is a blanket easement across the open space that allows them to access the trails as needed for construction after they're dedicated. So it was contemplated when the development was done, and in the conditional use and in the preliminary plan approval, that's one of the plans, that once the trails are dedicated, they still have the right to access them for construction of future phases.
So they can go through North Hills.
Well, North Hills is where the trail comes out. That's where they may have to, but they don't have to go through North Hills. They could access the trails at any place in the park and bring equipment through that way. It's their choice where they do it. They have an easement for it. If it's dedicated, they still have the right to use your trails for construction.
Okay. Okay, any other question for Brian?
This is Greystone.
Yes.
So are these trails able to be used by all of us without them having been dedicated?
You do that at your own risk.
But the people that live there are allowed to use it? Do they do it at their own risk too?
Yes.
Because I actually had a person who lived there tell me that I am not allowed to be there, that it's for them only.
That is inaccurate. The land is, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, the land is still owned by the developer.
Unless you were talking about walking through the 55 and older community, which is a different.
Yeah, the 55 and older community is a different phase of everything. There are some trails on that
Wait, I'm not sure where it was, but it was a trail and there were people on it.
I know that people are utilizing them, but you do so at your own risk.
Because there's the trail network is still technically owned by the developer. It's still considered private property.
Wasn't he supposed to be done with this trail at a certain time before he could go and do other things? That was my recollection from the beginning, but that's a long time ago. So is he having his feet held to the fire? Is he paying a fine? Is he just lollygagging? I mean, you know, it doesn't, what's the deal?
Just some comments on this. So the board's been involved with conversations with this developer for a long time. So the whole development's taken way longer than originally anticipated in terms of the construction phases. COVID slowed everything up. They probably didn't realize how long it would take to develop the infrastructure, to build the homes, to sell them, and everything else. So this isn't like a typical small subdivision in West Goshen that we've ever seen before. This has been a multi-year, 598 homes. I don't know how much the total infrastructure costs. So the original idea when people talked about this way back in 2010-12, oh well, do the infrastructure first, use this neighborhood improvement development process, the park will be done and we'll get everything dedicated and you'll be building homes. The view has changed around what that means for the benefit of the township. For us to take a park now, as Brian just explained, they still have rights to go in there, bring equipment through to finish up the infrastructure and build homes. Things get messed up. There's a risk to people that now are on township property. I see these big trucks driving down at God knows what speed on Aram Avenue, clipping curbs. If we've taken dedication of that, that's on us to fix. So the board had taken the position back a year ago that we want you to finish the infrastructure for this long drawn out construction. Get it done, get it fixed, go through the punch lists, have the roads ready for dedication and the park completed with all the punch list items done. And then we would consider accepting it. Now, whether that message sunk in or not, I don't know. I guess when they come to us in August or September and try and say, oh, the park's ready, will you take it? We'll be having the same conversation again.
But is there the chance that he's going to sell all of his homes, make all of his money, and never complete a punch list? And it's always
No, because we have escrow dollars for them to, they're held for them to specifically complete this work.
And then I'll get that back until it's done.
Each specific phase has its own escrow, and as they request releases from that, Brian inspects it, and they don't get money back unless it's completed.
So it's to their advantage to do it quickly as they can. So that's their leverage.
They're bound
They don't get their money.
They're bound by a series of developers and financial agreements.
Okay, any other comments, questions, other than the thunder? Okay, let's move on to our zoning officer's announcement by Shelby.
Two small announcements. As for the zoning hearing board cases, case number 4-2024 for the Kia of Westchester. The zoning hearing board met on June 24th, 2024 and granted the variance as requested by Kia of Westchester. As a reminder, the applicant sought to install a monument sign along Westtown Road 2 feet behind the public right-of-way. At this time, the township is waiting for new permits, which came in right before I came upstairs. This coming Monday, we do have a zoning hearing board. There will be two cases before the board. Case number 8-2024 for 800 East Virginia was before the board this evening. The second case was filed on behalf of BB Real Estate Investors LLC for the property located at 20 Ellis Lane. As noted on the application, the applicant is seeking a variance from section 8416C1 to permit the development of the property with multifamily dwellings on a lot less than 3 acres. Additionally, the applicant is seeking a variance from 8429E2 to the extent required to retain 3 existing parking spaces within that 100-foot parking setback. The application went before the board last month on June 18th, where the Board of Supervisors voted to take no position on the application. And then lastly, as Chris had mentioned, the conditional use case for the university will be next Wednesday here at the Township Building at 6 p.m. Anybody have any questions?
I just have a question. In your report here, your announcement here, there's the number of property maintenance concerns, number of residences. I'm just curious, can you explain a little bit about what are the consequences if a letter is sent certified requesting that there be some compliance done by a certain date, and the homeowner doesn't do that? What are the consequences?
So depending on the letter that was filed, the township has 2 recourses of action. Some of them pertain to trees within the right-of-way. The township has the opportunity to remove those trees, clean the property to get the costs back. In regards to the property maintenance complaints such as tall grass, rubbish and garbage outside, that follows the property maintenance code, which allows for fines to be imposed by the district magistrate. So that would go through the court process that way. So it all kind of depends on which code you're writing up.
Is there any procedure for appealing a letter received from the township?
Yeah, so inside that letter, I didn't attach one to my report, so I apologize. I'll attach one for the next time. It details what compliance is and how long they have, and then down below it also allows them an appeal process that's set forth through the International Property Maintenance Code. They're allowed 20 days to appeal the notice, and that goes, I believe, before the COG, Chris, correct?
Yes, it goes before the joint code of appeals. That's part of the COG. We actually had the hearing back in June, I believe.
Correct.
June, yeah.
But I like to give them a little bit of time after the appeal to try and get that corrected. So usually my notices are about 30 days unless it's a habitual letter writer.
I have one question. On the property maintenance, 549 Dorothy Lane, during that inspection it was observed that junk, trash, wood, debris, and other miscellaneous items are what?
Are on site, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, any other questions for Shelby? Hearing none, any questions from the public or concerns or comments? Okay.
I'm sorry, student rental program. Looks like you're going through discussions the way to revamp the rental program. Will you include in future questions regarding whether the rental is a student for students?
Yeah, we started that conversation. Chris and I actually had started that way back at PSATs, trying to get a better definition on our rental program and what is student housing. We looked at the short-term housing, and then the typical rental and how to kind of define those, and then what inspections and so forth would take place.
So going forward, you will include inquiries as to whether or not they're renting to students?
Correct.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's move on to reviewing and having comment on the Board of Supervisors meeting minutes of June 18, 2024. Is there any discussion regarding those meeting minutes? June 18th, the board? Changes?
I'll make the motion to.
Okay, anyone want to second that? Okay, any further discussion with the board on the proposed motion? Okay, hearing none, is there any public comment or questions on the meeting minutes? Okay, we'll vote now. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, no further discussion, motion passes by a vote of 4-0. Okay, moving on to item number 16. We're looking to possibly approve the treasurer's report dated June 30th, 2024 for the general fund, sewer revenue fund, the waste and recycling fund, and the capital reserve fund, and the bills to be paid from these funds. Okay, is there any questions, comments regarding the treasurer's report?
I have one question.
Okay.
Page 8, Lamb McFarland, for $3,376.25. It says SPCA, Chester County.
That was for, so Lamb Ackerling is our zoning hearing board solicitor, and the SPCA went before the zoning hearing board. There was a bill that had gotten submitted to us, and that caught us up.
Gotcha.
Okay, any other questions? from the
Yeah, I have
board?
a couple. Chris, there's one check number with two separate amounts for Glasgowing for the pavement repairs project for 2024. One is to general fund in the amount of $67,529, and the other, the bulk of it is in liquid fuels fund for $693,744. What's the reason for splitting the allocation?
Well, it's split between our liquid fuels allocation from the state and a portion coming up from the general fund that's included in our budget each year.
But it's just one check though, right?
Correct, it's one check. And just so the board is aware, that is not the entirety of the project. There is some retainage that's being withheld. However, the project is going to come in significantly under budget. Mark puts in a set amount of base repair, just to be conservative, and there was no base repair with this project.
Why didn't it come back along so good?
I had a second question on the manual bill, so go ahead if you're going to keep asking.
Well, I just wanted to ask you, just a follow-up on the paving project. Are they going to come back and complete the painting?
Yes. I did talk to Mark about that. I don't remember what he said about the timing, but yes, they are coming back to complete the line striping.
I noticed there's quite a gap between when they finish the road repair and the line painting. It can be like 2 or 3 months sometimes. But it was last year. There's a long gap. I just wonder why we don't schedule better than that.
Is the line painting part of our overall line bid for the season and not part of the paving program?
Correct.
Yep.
Because that's the different contractor that comes in from somewhere else in the, we start north in the state and work their way south. That's what Mark said.
Yeah, when we give them a contract, we should be able to say, we want you to do the line painting between July the 15th and August the 15th. If we know we're going to complete our road work.
Yeah, but it's in our contract as part of a multi-municipal contract.
Well, what's in the multi-municipal contract? I mean, we're all asking for service here. Surely we can kind of come up with a schedule that works for our paving programs. Let's try and improve the situation versus 3 months of no striping on roads. Just a question for next year. Okay, my other question on the bills, Chris, is on the page 17 on the invoices by GL account. I believe that fee from Unmo Turner Burke and Freeze is for Ryan's involvement.
Yes, we caught that. Check was printed, it's been voided.
Okay, because that should not be on the sewer authority, right?
That is correct, we caught that today.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a kind of administrative thing on the manual bills list for the BOS meeting. Is there any way the software could put page numbers on that as we're referencing? Like the page numbers are on the other invoices as we're referencing in the board meeting? I'm just wondering if it's possible to do it, put page numbers on it.
I can say.
Yeah, if we can. If not, that's fine. But I just thought it would be easier to try to find something on this piece of paper here. Okay, any other questions, comments regarding? Okay, let's take a vote then on.
We need a motion. I'll make a motion to pay the bills.
Okay, so anybody second that? Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
I have a question from Margie.
Okay.
I don't know which page it's on. There's a $3,700 payment to charge point, and she was asking for an explanation for that.
Do you know where that's located?
I'm sorry.
It's,
page.
so it's located on, it's in our 409 account for buildings. It's located on page 3. That is for a 3-year maintenance contract for the charging station at the municipal complex.
The public charges?
The public charging station at the municipal complex. And I'll note for the record that Ms. Swart emailed me about that, and I did respond to her with the information.
Okay, thank you.
No comments? Okay. We didn't make the motion yet.
We did.
Second public comment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, no further discussion. Motion passes by a vote of 4-0. Okay. Approval of the treasurer's report. And the last item, anybody want to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Okay, second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming.